So this should fucking work because I just got the live stream link. So let's just all right. There we go. We're starting to see things. We're starting to see they're live. All right, it's live. You want to share the link before we start talking shit?
Yeah, you want to put it in the chat or whatever? Can you do that?
Sure. Let me
chat.
Yeah.
I'll put it out there. Oops. What did I do?
All right, let's go back to let me stop sharing my screen. Actually, that would be helpful.
Yeah, that would.
There we go. All right.
Bite.
All right, guys.
So
this may be the craziest thing we've ever done.
Yeah, where's your video, Peter?
I'm popping it back on. I'm just
Peter's
on the other side of the room.
He was doing something vile off camera.
He was rubbing it out before every podcast.
No,
he normally does.
general vileness.
The vilest kind. I just don't like sitting under these lights when I don't have to.
All right, so I want to send you. I'm gonna just what should I do? Just link tag you all on a tweet.
Yeah,
sure.
Just tweet at us.
All right.
Vin, are you hearing that echo?
That's from his phone playing the. He opened it on his phone. Yeah.
All right. Let's see. What do I want to say? Listen to scientists debate the hard cap and the definition of Bitcoin.
There you go.
I'm a scientist now?
Dude,
that's good. That's very provocative.
Honorary title?
Who else is more qualified to talk about this? I mean, when you actually think about it.
Nobody. Nobody's qualified. That's the whole point.
Cartoon character with 100 followers I saw on Twitter.
So I tagged both of y'all. I'm gonna go fill up my drink, and I'll be right back. Then we can get started.
Do it.
So I actually did for as little as I prepared, I actually did prepare some things I would like to discuss because I'm actually being a little bit selfish. I'm trying to learn exactly the viewpoints because obviously, let me turn off Doctor Who. This shit's a little bit too loud. Anyways, so if it's cool with y'all, I don't think that we've actually talked to any length really. I would actually like to get to know y'all a little bit and your views on crypto. So maybe we could start there, and then it doesn't necessarily have to be a super guided tour. If y'all want to, talk about something specific, we can. But I do have some things I want to talk about.
Yeah,
I think what's
go ahead, dude.
Probably end up happening. We're going to agree on most things. I don't think I'm part of a cult as hardcore as you might think. I might be. I don't know. It depends. But so the first thing
you're in a cult. If you're in a cult, you definitely do not know you're in a cult. That's part of being in a cult.
Oh, then I'm definitely in a cult. Gotcha.
But you're right. You're on the right path out of the cult if you're starting to feel weird feelings inside.
Right. Oh, dude, definitely. No, when I listen to when I listen to you, well, ever since I listened to Bitcoin Uncensored, I've had weird feelings, just in general. So
Rose will give everybody weird feelings.
Jeez.
So I know this might sound like very obvious, but if you wouldn't mind, can we just go over what is so first maybe quick introduction for people who don't know who you are, Peter Ryan, and then Vin Armani. Is that your real last name?
What do you think? Do you think that's really my real last name? What do you think?
I don't think so, but I think it's a badass last name.
Good. Yes, it is a badass last name.
Anyway, so maybe you can just quickly one paragraph who you are, and then we can get going. So Peter, you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm Peter Ryan. I am the Director of Growth at CoinSpice and lead researcher at Ryan Research. I I have a background in economics and sort of startup and tech world. I first got involved with Bitcoin in 2013 as a college kid that was brought in through the libertarian door. And I interned at the Bitcoin Center NYC, had a lot of fun there, took my detour back into Normie land and just worked around. And then in about 2 years ago, I decided I wanted to get like public in crypto and get more involved. So I joined, did some more stuff. Then I ended up joining with CoinDesk as their research analyst, did a lot of work for them. And in April, I took a new turn towards my current roles that I just described.
Cool. Ben?
Okay, I am Vin Armani. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of Cointext, and I have been involved in Bitcoin since 2012 and developing since 2014. And then back in really, really heavily starting about 2016. So I'm very staunch libertarian, voluntarist. I've lived a quite an interesting life, but I did a stint on a TV show that was on from 2010 till 2016 on Showtime. I was one of the stars of that, and so after that, I was like, well, what am I going to throw my energies back into? And I've just never found anything that was as interesting to me that held my attention for as long as Bitcoin. And so now I'm just exploring it more every day, and in the process of writing my third book. And this one is heavily focused on Bitcoin. The other ones were sort of, there's philosophical, economic, and libertarian, but this one is way more focused on Bitcoin. So
One thing I think that's interesting, correct me if I'm wrong, I think there was like this show called Cowboys for Angels.
Gigolos was the name of the show. Yes.
But there's like some kind of service called Cowboys for Angels, I think.
That's right.
And
Correct.
I actually was a little kid, and we're like flipping through and watched that with my parents. And it was you, I think, and some other guy who seemed a lot less organized. It was like this one guy was like, I do push-ups before the dates. And then it was you was like,
Right.
man, you have to, really know how to, so they focused on at least the probably the 10 minutes we watched it, because I'm watching this with my parents, right? I think it's kind of funny now that I'm talking to you about something just completely unrelated, but that's I think it's kind of funny. I think you had a little bit more clout than you think. I don't know. You definitely reached Atlanta, Georgia that day, so.
Well, yeah, it's been syndicated into like 30 countries now at this point. But what's interesting is that a lot of people they don't see the connection between that past portion of my life and Bitcoin. I mean, I was a software developer before that whole weird section of my life ever came up. I was already a professional software developer with a relatively long career, but I was in an all cash business. And that was really in like 2012 what attracted me to going out and really buying a lot of Bitcoin. Was I was trying to figure out what could I do with my cash to keep it off sort of the financial radar that would, you know what I mean, to keep myself safe in that way. And so the fact is, most people haven't actually lived a life where they've done it mainly in cash and don't actually know what that's like, or had a business that was mainly in cash. Most people who are in Bitcoin have been within the current financial paradigm. And so, that's being able to do it in real life and know what it's like to live in an all cash life. There's a huge tie-in with Bitcoin. Like, that's why it's important to me.
Cool. I like the history there, the roots. Mine come from, I guess, other things. I don't exactly know. I think it's my kind of distrust in how current things are going, I guess you could say, in general. And I think I kind of fell into the, can't trust, it kind of goes back to the old paradigm for me, like, ultimate power corrupts ultimately in our regime. I feel like this is kind of like it's a little bit of an equalizer to some extent. We'll kind of see if that's true, but I think that's where I get some of my passion from.
It can be.
Yeah, if used correctly, right? I mean, any technology.
Yeah.
Ryan, I think Ben and I kind of talked a little bit about how maybe a little bit of passion, how we got in. What was your kind of far away, what made you passionate about this space?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, part of my history has been working around tech and startups and venture capital. And outside of that, I've just been coming to the, philosophy of libertarianism, the more specific Austrian economics, all these things that are wrapped up with it independently. And I kept getting to these points in it where it just seemed like the only avenues that everyone that I was listening to, reading, it was always like a political paradigm. You always had to find out how to elect some version of Gary Johnson. And I just found that like not satisfying. And I looked around my college libertarian club and I was like, these are not the people that are going to change society. If you could imagine the grouping of folks and that would attend that and not like go to a keg party in college. So I said the only way that you're going to make a difference is like through business, like all the memes that were coming out about Silicon Valley and startups. That made sense to me. That's where I saw, the real game changer and looking up to these Silicon Valley CEOs and founders. And then Bitcoin walked through the door one day and somebody gave me the pitch and it all clicked that this was the tech intersection of libertarianism. And this was actually the best chance at bringing these ideas into the real world
I
in a very
completely agree.
agorist-like way.
So I really saw Bitcoin as like, hey, everyone's just talking a lot of shit. This is actually an action item that we can actually focus on, and I completely agree with you. Like all these, I feel like I actually went to a couple libertarian type meetups in Atlanta, and a lot of people are just, I feel like, complaining, and I feel like a lot of the Bitcoin developers and like a lot of the Bitcoin people are actually like trying to build something versus just complain about it, and I'm with you on that. So.
Well, I lived in New Hampshire for the last year. I've only been back in California since April, and was part of doing the whole Free State Project thing when I was there. And there's a lot of cryptocurrency use there, but I have to be honest, like for me, I felt that was the only really revolutionary thing that that I saw that people were doing to really push liberty. I mean, there are a lot of people there who are like running for state office and doing these sorts of things. And I'm like, okay, I guess that's kind of cool. But, as you say, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And like, I would see people who I had known them. And then they were like, oh, I'm going to run for state rep. And then they were state rep for like a day. And they were already talking about like, yeah, it's just us few in that room and we really hold the power in the whole state. And I was like, dude, you've been a rep for a day.
It's already,
already you're no law, you're a status now. Like you were talking all this shit and it really didn't even matter. So it's like Bitcoin is the one thing that it's like when you do it, it's just undeniable. Like it's a real action. So I'm fully on board and I feel the same way as you guys. Like it is the path to getting to a libertarian future for sure.
So both y'all mentioned, I guess you're kind of like self-proclaimed libertarians. Is that kind of what you'd say?
For
Like,
sure.
I guess, does that kind of mean like classical liberal, or does that mean anarchist? What does that mean to y'all?
I'm more on the anarchist side. So voluntarist, though, I think is the better term. It's like much better defined. And that's just, I mean, the tagline of voluntarist is neither ballots nor bullets. So, and I consider myself an agorist too. So it's like counter economics. So that the path is really to outside of the purview of the state with voluntary human interaction to create to reduce violence, increase peace, increase human prosperity. Whereas I think classical liberals are still, most of them are like think the state is okay. I definitely don't.
So what was that term that you used just a second ago?
Either voluntarist or agorist is
Agorist.
or agorist. Yeah, some people say agorist. I think agorist sounds better, but it's agorist, and it's I guess it's a wing of radical libertarianism that was first. The term was first coined by Sam Konkin. He was the author. He wrote 2 books on it. And Yeah, it's sort of it came out of like the milieu of like Rothbard and all of that. So he was one of the people kind of hanging around in that group. And it's really about pushing a libertarian future and a libertarian agenda through black and gray markets. That's basically what it is.
So I know you can't see it, but I just changed my view for the live stream to look up agorist, like the definition, while you're talking about it. But anyways,
yeah, so counter economics is basically what agorism is about. That's their goal. And so Bitcoin is like, it's the fulfillment of that. So this is an idea and an ideology that he was right. Konkin was writing about it in the late 70s, early 80s, and saying like, if there was a way for us to do this, here's the path that we could take outside of the state with no violence, all of this, and then boom, here's Bitcoin. So for somebody who's an agorist already, Bitcoin comes along and it's like, okay, just exactly what Peter said. It's like, boom, oh shit, here it is. Obviously, this is what we should be doing.
Yeah, it's definitely that circumvention rather than permission to sort of have your free society that was really interesting about Bitcoin. Yeah, and I would largely define myself libertarian and cap. You could probably throw in maybe Rothbardian, Hoppian to a large extent. But, where I come from, like specifically in my history, again, is sort of like right before I joined up with CoinDesk a few years back, because I was doing a few different things. One of the cool projects I was involved in was I was doing a lot of sort of economic research and sort of content creation for what you could roughly call the sort of startup society kind of movement, I would say. And this largely is inherited from the idea of what the economist Paul Romer, he was actually a professor at my alma mater, NYU, and he recently won the Nobel Prize. So among his achievements, one of his big thing is that he created this idea of the special economic zone being such of a powerful tool to basically create like thousands of city states as a way to like bring sort of a lot of experimentation into the way states operate. So instead of like trying to change the entire state, you could just start popping all these little city states around the world, and you could create, baby freedom through these tolls that you put. And there's a wider movement. So you can look up Paul Romer. He has the idea of using sort of city states, special economic zones as the tool to make this happen. Real world examples of this have been everything that's gone on in China since the 80s, where they basically have created these very specific types that have allowed Western capitalists to come in to create factories and special areas. And so right around 2016, I was working a lot in this sort of space and bringing some people to the table and working out some of these ideas. Other people that are not exactly in the mainstream like Paul Romer is, but like the people behind Liberland. There's people behind the Seasteading Institute. All these different groups are sort of coming together and coalescing to basically, in a similar fashion to Bitcoin, instead of like asking permission from the state to please let us be libertarian, like we're just going to go out in the middle of the ocean and start our own country with our own laws, and it's going to be free of any oppression because we're sort of circumventing you. We're going around the laws. And so like there's the seasteaders, there's the Liberlanders, there's more of these like sort of economic wonks, like I mentioned. And I was getting involved in that. And it came to the conclusion that this movement, Bitcoin, they're sort of the same spirit animal. And these types of mechanisms and these types of methods people are utilizing, this is what's going to get us to push the ball forward. And it's not going to be electing Gary Johnson or Bill Weld or dealing with Nick Sorwork like in the friggin' Libertarian Party. This is where the action's happening.
It needs to be a grassroots thing. You can't just going through the current system may not work like what you're saying. So I think that's kind of interesting. I think also I know Andreas Antonopoulos, that is, has really like honed in on this talking point before any of this stuff is possible, you need like the first thing we need is money, is a good, sound money,
Absolutely.
to
Yeah.
drive all this cool stuff on top. And it's really like the base layer has to be done right. And I think that's what we're talking about, because we're helping build the pillars that are going to maybe build the future, right? So um,
Well, you don't necessarily need new money, but you certainly need to make sure that the methodology for moving whatever money you're going to use around is censorship resistant.
yeah,
Right. So that's it's not that you necessarily need new money. We've got a lot of money, but what Bitcoin brought to the table that wasn't there before, and I mean it's the introduction of the white paper, is it took it's disintermediation. So like it took the intermediaries out, because so long as you have a system where you've got intermediaries, which we've had for 900 years now, where that was just built into the system, it's very easy for the state to censor transactions. Very easy for it to do that. All you got to do is just capture the intermediaries, or as it is now, the intermediaries have actually captured the state. So they're like one and the same. The censor and the state are the same thing.
I guess what you're really talking about are the properties need to be there. It doesn't necessarily, the vehicle specifically doesn't necessarily matter, but the properties of it have to be, kind of freedom enabling, I guess is what you're saying. Or
well, no, the vehicle is the most important part. So like I say, we have a ton of money already out there. Like human beings will figure out a money. We're at the point now where we'll just figure it out. I mean, in prison, they'll use cans of tuna fish. They used to use cigarettes. They'll use stamps. You know what I mean? You put people in a situation and you have a commodity that's relatively standardized. If there's no other money around, they'll start using that as money. Like we culturally have the money meme already, but the problem is not the money. And that's why I've been pushing this meme, and we don't need to get into it too much here, because it's Bitcoin is not money. Bitcoin is not money.
Let's just keep that right here. Let's remember that Bitcoin. We can refer back to it.
10 hours of VidOrMoney content about this subject already.
There you go. Bitcoin is not money. I wonder if this is backwards for everyone. I think I'm not sure if this is going to look right.
No, it's not. It's just backwards for you. It's perfect.
Yeah, but the audience is seeing it from my point of view.
Yeah, well, the statement is backwards anyway. You know what I mean? For most people,
all right.
I think that it's Bitcoin is the vehicle. So Bitcoin is it's the ledger that's storing value, but Bitcoin doesn't have value in and of itself. And there are people who will argue with that, but I think that we're seeing, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation if Bitcoin didn't have an exchange rate to fiat.
Yep.
Everybody who perceives the value of Bitcoin perceives it in US dollars. Like go through everybody who's like Bitcoin, to the moon, to the moon. What? Like it's to the moon.
They'll denominate it in their most memeified money in their local jurisdiction. Like Mike in Space might do Canadian dollars. We might do US dollars, and
so we have the money. Right. So Bitcoin didn't change the money, and it certainly didn't change the unit of account in the way that we account for it, because nobody accounts for it in Satoshis. The only reason that you want to stack Satoshis is because there's an exchange rate of those Satoshis. But no merchant out there is denominating shit in Bitcoin. Well, nobody's doing that.
It's hard for me to say nobody, but I agree with you. Like most people are doing the dollar equivalent. Like they'll say, hey, it's $20 worth of Bitcoin, and I do that as well with, when I interact with people, of course. So, it's kind of hard not to get, kind of hard to get away from that when everything else is priced in, US dollars. It's going to take a pretty long time for things to be priced in, Bitcoin, and for us to start doing that if that's the way we're going. So.
Well, let me ask you, because it's funny that everybody always says that, right? They're like, and I used to say that, oh, it'll take a long time before everything is priced in Bitcoin. And I'm like, it seems a little underpants know me in a way, because it's like okay, well, we have Bitcoin. Everybody's using Bitcoin. Let's say right now every merchant accepted Bitcoin. It's like, okay, every merchant accepts Bitcoin, yet they still price it in US dollars. It's like they're going to go through and change the price of everything, right? Bitcoin. Why on earth? What would have to happen for them to stop pricing it in US dollars? Even if everybody stopped using US dollars, right?
It needs to be as usable as US dollars first.
Well, I see. I don't even think it's that, because what's the name of the British currency?
Pound.
The pound sterling.
Yeah.
Right. Pound sterling used to denominate an actual pound of 92.5% silver, which is sterling silver.
Mm-hmm.
The coin was an actual pound. Now, they don't use a pound of silver as an actual coin anymore, but you still denominate everything in pound sterling.
But that's fine. They made pound sterling usable. So we would need the same thing for Bitcoin to start pricing, because like right now, let's say you're trying to use Lightning Network and on chain, and or whatever. It's simply it's not scalable enough for everybody. So it's like it's hard to go down that path first, right?
Let's imagine that it was, though. Like, that's what I'm asking you. I'm like,
if it was, then I
thing?
think what you're saying, like I think if it was like scalable and it was for everybody, then we could go to a method where you could start pricing stuff in Bitcoin. But by the time it's usable and 3-4 billion whatever plus people can use it, then we might also see some more less volatility. That might be a couple more boom and bust cycles, I would imagine.
Sure, but what would be the thing that would make people stop pricing in? I guess that's the question that I'm asking, because I don't think it's money. I think it's value transfer. So I think that it's always going to be useful in saying, oh, even if you only use Bitcoin, right? Like right now, like you could just use Visa, and there's no actual dollars, like it's ones and zeros, but everything is still priced
usable. It's usable,
but it's not priced in Visas. Like we wouldn't be sitting here saying, well, if everybody was using Visa, we would start denominating everything in Visas. Well, nobody denominates everything in Visas. They denominate it in dollars, even though it's not dollars, right?
Not yet.
Right. I think this is getting a little meta, because Visa's never tried to price it in anything maybe besides like the local currencies like US dollars and stuff. Right. So yeah, it's kind of hard for me to think about. But if I would say if Bitcoin could be used for like I said, billions of people right now, I think the talk of starting to price things in Bitcoin as a standard, I think, is not far fetched. But until that becomes possible, I think it is kind of like, oh yeah, you're gonna think about it in like US dollars or British pounds or whatever.
No, I agree. I just don't. I guess you're a little more optimistic in terms of, I do not think that people would start to. I can't understand what the catalyst would be, because it's kind of emergent, right? How we price things, it's emergent, and it's like I can't understand what the catalyst would be, where a merchant would decide that, because it takes a first merchant to make that decision, right?
Oh no, but I think
I can understand what the catalyst would be for him to be like, well, I've been pricing everything in dollars.
So the first merchants are going to be us, are going to be the evangelists, are going to be the people who
I'm not interested.
No, it's gonna be us and our friends, and it's a meme that's gonna spread. Like I know, like there's a barbershop in Atlanta. This guy comes to all the tab meetups, the Atlanta blockchain meetups, and he would love to price everything. He would love for Bitcoin to be scalable and be used and all over, and he would be very happy to price all of his haircuts and all of his things in Bitcoin, and he'd be happy to if all all of his providers would use Bitcoin to charge him money for his utilities and stuff. And it like you said, it's a domino effect, but I don't think it's too far fetched if the technology is there in the first place. Right now, I don't think the tech is there.
Well, it's not like he can't do that. He can just accept Tether or accept what other various stablecoin that's out there, and then he's using blockchain.
Yeah,
but no one's actually doing that.
Yeah, but the point isn't to just use blockchain; it's to use like a better money, like something that's not just like a US dollar or something.
Well,
I think
why
for
is it
him.
better?
Yeah.
Why is it better if I can't price anything in it, right? So like if I can't effectively price things in it. So money being a unit of account, it's like that's a better money would be the best medium, the best would be the best medium of exchange, best unit of account, and best store of value.
Mm-hmm.
But if I've got a money that is a really bad unit of account, like I really can't use it as a unit of account, isn't it actually not the best money?
So I think if and when the tech gets there to scale to billions of people, I think by then it would be a good unit of account. I think that would take time though. I don't think I'm not sure. Like if let's say the tech would be super massively available for everybody, I think that would also be a long time from now. Like not like around the corner, but like let's say at least 20 years from now, whatever. I think by the time 20 years comes around, it's going to be a lot more people are going to be warmed up to that idea.
It's interesting because if you look at like coins throughout history, they all started out as primarily as units of account, like from the jump.
Yeah, Bitcoin's like not starting out as a unit of account.
Not at all. I mean, like a pound, a British pound. It initially was a pound of pure silver, right? And it's like it's in its name, it's a unit of account. It's like this thing, I'm pricing it in, it is worth this many pounds of silver. Like a horse might be, 3 pounds. 3 pounds of silver for a horse. It's like unit of account. Boom, right in there.
Yeah. Bitcoin's
every other money. So it's like, so it's a weird scenario when you're like, wow, in all of history, unit of account was baked in from the beginning, but now we've got to wait until Bitcoin is accepted by billions of people before it can be used as a unit of account. That's kind of weird.
It's backed by scarcity.
Well, we could talk about that too.
Yeah, that's something I think we both have just sort of
it's backed by proof of work.
Well, I don't know if it's backed by proof of work. That's an interesting one too. Like proof of work is
it's backed by Adam Back.
That's probably more correct.
Yeah.
I think that's actually Peter.
It's got the 3 backs. It's got the 3
Bitcoin
backs.
is a central bank. Yes.
Well, yeah, it's got the 3 backs. It's got proof of work, scarcity, and Adam Back.
I think 2 and 3 go together. Like Peter, I think explains this very, very well. That in reality, probably it is that Bitcoin is really backed by Adam Back, and Peter should explain. Seriously, you should explain why that is.
Yeah. So I mean, I've been trying to wrap my head around all these things, and have certainly believed in Santa Clauses and storks and various other myths that we have in the Bitcoin space, as well as the libertarian space. But what I sort of I'm getting to, I think I'm solidifying on this idea, is that Bitcoin is not akin to gold in the way that most maximalists talking about. We appreciate scarcity as a principle, but Bitcoin does not have the same scarcity that gold has. You have to go to a cave, you have to dig a mine, you need to grab it from wherever in the world that it's above the ground to get gold. There are physical constraints that you just cannot get around. In Bitcoin, even though we value this principle, tomorrow they can double the supply and nobody bats an eyelash. I mean, like people can bat an eyelash, but that's a function of human consensus.
We're getting right into it.
Yeah, so this is where I say, it's not that Bitcoin is exactly 1-for-1 the same as the Federal Reserve. I'm saying that similar to how we have like the British parliamentary system and then we have the American, congressional system, these things are, they're the same entity, they're the same species or, kingdom, but they're different species. They're different types of designs and full of different checks and balances on them. So similarly, Bitcoin's coming to the table and saying, we are basically proposing this imaginary money, and we've designed a system of incentives of miners, exchanges, big businesses, and developers and users and various other parties that come together and basically arrive at consensus through a few different mechanisms that creates Bitcoin. And thus the hard cap, the scarcity in Bitcoin is only there because the humans say it's there. And I say this as a example, the proof in the pudding, that BIP 42 happened, and other things have happened, but just let's use that. BIP 42 happened, and it was seen as a joke that basically they fixed a bug that was in the code that would have way down the road resulted in, unexpected inflation. And they fixed that, claiming, okay, everything's fine, nothing to worry about. But the sheer fact that that bug was in there and that was actually the course that we were set on means that was the scarcity. That was like the constraint. And because they went in and fixed that constraint, it proves that they can move the scarcity around. And because they did that and no one made a big deal over it, it proves that, whether it's the developers or whoever else, they have this like superpower that they can go in and they can manipulate the supply whenever they feel like it. And whether it's like improving a bug or maybe like just moving 0.001% more inflation, whatever they do, it proves that it is not gold. It proves that it is more akin to whatever a central bank is, and that it's a human organization that is creating imaginary money versus a commodity money.
So I agree. I don't think there's anything I disagree with there. But I don't know if like you're perturbed or like if you think like this is like some like unfair thing, but you do agree like if there is a bug, like it's okay to fix it if like the original intention was okay. So but the goal of that is just to say like, look, this is run by humans, not like code is law kind of thing, right? That's what you're trying to say.
I think it like people talk about the danger of certain marketing and promotions all the time in this space. I mean, I think it's cute that the people that are loudest when it comes to those warnings are the ones going around saying this is exactly 1-for-1 gold. Bitcoin is digital gold, or it's now new gold, whatever Adam Back is parroting. So
I mean, it's an easy analogy for people who don't know anything about it. I mean, if you take any analogy too literally, it's going to fall apart pretty good though.
Well, that's where I think it's better. I think it's better and more honest to suggest that Bitcoin basically inherits the human institution of central banks in terms of, we could think of this as like the evolution of economics. Central banks were on the gold standard at one point. They had a scarce policy and like they believed in the commodity money theory, and then they all went off of it, and there were certain reasons for that, and we can all get hang-ups about why they did it if that was for the best. But the point being is that we live in the advanced world now, and like everybody's a fiat central bank, and what we can say is that we can go back to sort of the scarcity principle, but we can retain the evolution of sort of having the more human, almost you could say postmodern money central bank, and we can move that further to say, well, now we have a decentral bank.
I like that, because you can't. What's great about this is that the problem with the central bank is not that the central bank does what the central bank does. Like, that's actually not the problem. When the central bank is functioning correctly, then it's like, oh, good. Like, in theory, the central bank is great. It's like, wow, they're controlling the inflation, like everything, if they actually had all the answers. But see, that's the problem with the central bank, is that we know they don't have all the answers. 2, we know that they can get corrupt. And then 3, we can't opt out. If you're in a country, you can't opt out. It's your inability to opt out and the lack of competition that's the problem. Because if you could opt out and there was competition, the chances are at least one central bank would be making the right decisions for you, and the economy would be good, and the rest of them would go away. So that's really what Bitcoin is offering. And that's what we see in the space, is we see a lot of different central bank governors, right? Those are the developers of the various individual chains. And they're like, on our chain, it's like this, and I'm the person that's here. And on this chain, it's like this, and this chain, it's like this. And while you could say like, I'm part of this central bank and I love this central bank and they're the real central bank, you can say that, but it's just not rational when you look at what's going on.
So do you think like that Bitcoin's pretty much just going to be a better version of transparent banking, where maybe we won't fall into the same pitfalls because we will just have a more like open, like transparent money system, but it'll still kind of have like the same kind of like similar type structure of what we have now. Is that what you're alluding?
Yeah, I may have some like hangups about the term bank, but for the simplicity of it right now, yeah, I think that we can retain sort of the ideas of gold being scarce and returning to central banks were once on a gold standard. I think we can have all those memes, but we can also like have that line of progress going from, you know, commodity money, sort of private banks, commercial banks, and then sort of national central banks. And now we're moving towards, and it's fiat national central banks. And now it's sort of, we're either going to go sort of like global tyrannical, you know, central fiat banks, or like we're moving now, we're going into decentral banks that have what Bitcoin is, imaginary money. And yeah.
Well, I was going to say, you know how like Vin was talking about, you know, when the British pound sterling came out, it was like literally a unit of account. Like, what do you think about like maybe we're thinking about it the wrong way? Like, Bitcoin was never supposed to be a unit account. Things were supposed to be unit accounts against it. So like maybe like fiat currency, saying like 1 Bitcoin pound sterling equivalent, you know, like something like where it's like a certain amount of, you know, issued, you know, money backed by Bitcoin, and then that Bitcoin being publicly auditable. So, you know, like if you ever have more money than the bank has publicly available, then you know, like, you know, they're maybe doing more fractional reserve than they said, or they're bullshit or something. Like, what do you think about that?
I think you have nailed it. You've nailed exactly why I say Bitcoin is not money, because the money is the underlying thing that you value. What Bitcoin is Bitcoin is a value ledger that is open to everyone. So it's to go with what Peter was talking about banking and how you said, will this be a better version of banking? I think if you go back to before there was banking, to what was the proto bank, so the institution that was solving the problem that then grew into banks, you're going back 900 years to basically the year 1100, and you're going to the Knights Templar during the Crusades. And so basically what you would do if you were you're a European, you're going on the Crusades, let's say you're in France and you're going to go down to the Holy Land, you take all of your gold, all of your wealth, you take it to a Knights Templar, basically their little fort, you give it to them, they give you a note saying, yeah, this is John Doe, and he left us with 20 pounds of gold or whatever. Then you get down to Jerusalem, you take it to the next Knights Templar fort that they have in Jerusalem, you hand that over, and they give you the gold. So the idea is you dropped your gold off in France. Your gold didn't go to France. Like, it didn't go to France at all. It's just that there was a single global institution that had a single global ledger. And at any place where you could interact with that ledger by interacting with the Knights Templar, then they would do an exchange for you, and that they would exchange out the money. So you had all of these people traveling around with basically a ledger record. Right? They're traveling thousands and thousands of miles with a ledger record, but that ledger record, they knew they had trust and confidence that they could exchange it for the money. So the ledger record isn't the money, the gold is the money. And so that's what we're doing with Bitcoin. And if you see, that's really the value of Bitcoin is.
Wait, gold.
What can I do?
Wait, just to recap, gold is the money in this
gold
situation.
Is the money. Gold is the money.
So but Bitcoin, would it be the money if you had Bitcoin backed?
No.
It seems like, because it seems like you could take the same analogy and just say, hey, I give you 20 Bitcoin or something, and now instead of 20 pounds of gold, and now it's like Bitcoin is acting as the gold equivalent. Like, explain.
Sure.
So just
Bitcoin.
Clarify,
Bitcoin is the numbers on the ledger, right? So the numbers on the ledger, because Bitcoin has this exchange rate, right? What the US dollar value of 1 Bitcoin is changes constantly, right? So
sure,
I could
same
say
with gold, right?
Same with gold.
Yeah.
Same with gold. But the thing with the Knights Templar is that if you dropped off 20 pounds of gold, you would be able to get 20 pounds of gold, right? So what we're doing in this case is I'm making an exchange. We don't have that because the value changes against the ledger, because you're not actually storing a deposit. That's what makes Bitcoin a little bit different. And that's why it's not the money. is that the money is what you exchange. There's no deposit and withdrawal from Bitcoin. All the Satoshis stay on the ledger at all times, not like the gold that goes into the fort and then comes out of the fort, and then they have less gold overall in the system. So I exchange $200. I get the Bitcoin equivalent at that exchange rate. I can now go anywhere in the world, and if I find another person who's willing to exchange for whatever the currency is, for whatever that is in Bitcoin, I can trade them out the Bitcoin and make the exchange. Functionally, it's the same thing that the Knights Templar were doing. So it's like it's resolving the bank problem and doing it in a way where the ledger stands alone. It's not a ledger of deposit and withdrawal. That's what's hard to wrap your head around, because a bank is a ledger of what is on deposit.
So I think the weird part though is with Bitcoin, it's kind of acting like, if you use Bitcoin straight up, it's kind of acting. This is my opinion, so I think it slightly conflicts, but I think it's kind of acting as the money and the currency at the same time, which is why I'm not maybe understanding like your analogy with the Knights Templar with gold and stuff, because it seems like they would be able to use the Bitcoin as the money and the currency. Or maybe are you trying to differentiate between currency and money at all? Or I'm curious there as well.
Well, we could in this case. So for instance, as you had this version of the Knights Templar evolved, and what evolves is that eventually people are not trading the gold anymore. Eventually people are trading the little certificate that was given to them by the Knights Templar, right? So now you've got like a bearer certificate, a bearer bond, or you could have an order certificate, which we know as checks, right? Like checks are super old. They still say the same thing that they've always said: pay to the order of. So it's the idea that I could drop something off, they've got my name, and I could tell them to pay somebody else, and that person could take that thing. So Bitcoin is that. Bitcoin is the order instrument. But what's weird, and again, what's weird about it and why it's such a different paradigm is that it's a ledger that sort of has the properties of like a bank ledger, but it's not actually recording anything. It's recording itself. So like Bitcoin doesn't know, like the number of Satoshis don't increase or decrease dependent upon how much gold is taken out of the ground. Like the numbers of pounds sterling increased or decreased based on the actual pounds of sterling silver that were available in the economy. Bitcoin's going to be the same whether 10,000 Bitcoins gets you a pizza or whether 10,000 Bitcoins buys you a yacht. Bitcoin's going to be the same. Do you understand what I'm saying? That the supply within the network is going to be the same. It's going to be this amount every 10 minutes is going to be generated. Does that make sense?
Sure. I mean, granted, halvings and stuff like that. I think I understand what you're saying, like in terms of the supply. Like on, I'll be honest, I'm not 100% following you. I have a whiteboard. This is why we have a whiteboard. But
let me do it like this, right?
Wait, hold on. I mean, there's the Knights Templar. Hold on. You got a sword.
You got Knights Templar, do a sword, but let's just do a bank, right? Let's just do a bank.
He's the bank, right?
He's the bank. So he begins his banking career, okay? And he has 0. Right? There is zero on his ledger. His ledger has 0.
0 what? 0 gold?
0 anything, right? He's just got a blank. We're talking about a ledger, like a credits and debit sheet, right? He's just got a sheet in front of him, and he says, "What's in the bank? What is in the bank right now?" It is 0 when he begins, right? Now, how does that number change?
He gets a deposit.
He gets a deposit. Somebody comes and actually deposits something with him, right? And if that person comes and they take their deposit out, so let's say he gets a deposit of 100. Somebody comes, they give him a deposit of 100. Let's say 100 pieces of gold. Now he's got 100. Okay.
Boom.
Now that person comes and they take 50 out. And then he's going to have, so it's minus 50. Then he's going to have 50 in there. Right? The total units that are on the ledger is now 50. And because that's associated with something that's actually on deposit in the bank. Now let's go Bitcoin.
Okay.
So
hold on. This is the first paradigm.
That's the first paradigm. That's the
so
first.
Now we're going. What? 100 Bitcoin, rich guy.
So no, we're just going Satoshi starts. Satoshi begins Bitcoin, Genesis block.
Okay. Sure.
Right? So he's got the first block comes in, 50 Bitcoin. Second block comes in, 50 Bitcoin.
All right. So now he's at 100.
Yep, at 100. Now he sends 10 Bitcoin to Hal Finney.
All right. So he's at 90.
No.
Or so he's actually at 140.
We're talking about how many Bitcoin are in the system.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so that's not going to change unless you burn coins or something.
But even if you burn the coins, they're still in the system because you burn them just to an unspendable address. But if I lose my private key, that also is an unspendable address, right? Like I've got Bitcoins that I bought back in 2012 that I just sent around and I've lost the private key. They'll never be spendable, but they didn't leave the system. So that's why it's a different type of ledger.
I'm not 100% sure that I'll go with you for this argument's sake because I understand what you're saying, but I wonder if like technically you can like literally sense like a null address and just like completely like not actually make a UTXO and just blow it away. I'm not 100% sure.
You can't. So an op return, which is a null, I think with an op return you actually can send some amount of Bitcoin, but it still becomes a UTXO. So you can look at the UTXO list, and if you do a sum of it, that will actually tell you the total number of Bitcoins that have been mined. You can't destroy a Bitcoin. You can't destroy it. Once it's been mined, it's in the system. And so that just tells you that those numbers don't reference anything in the physical world the same way that a bank's ledger back to the Knights Templar is actually a reference to something that's sitting in a physical vault. And so when you had gold, and precious metals in the beginning of money, you bootstrap this idea. Bitcoin is just a completely different paradigm. There's no deposit, no withdrawal. It's not referencing anything in the real world. We're exchanging for the right to spend the UTXO to change the ledger.
I would agree. You can't compare like something like that's using computers, technology like this to gold. It's just completely fundamentally different. But I think like there's a lot of like abstract similarities. I guess. What point are you trying to make that this is like just a completely different system? What was the overall point exactly? I forget.
That's right. That it's a completely different paradigm. That money has a historical and a functional and a definitional, that it's all there, and that Bitcoin is just not it. And so when we say Bitcoin is gold, when we say Bitcoin is money, it's it's kind of a cool metaphor and it's easy to understand when you're first getting involved. Sure. But for people who have been in it for a while, it's kind of like
I didn't actually know I was going to go down this route. But what maybe Peter, even if you want to give me some, I don't know if y'all differ. Peter, first off, do you think Bitcoin is money or no? I'm curious. It sounds like no as well, right?
So I like Vin's idea. I don't think we're as in alignment, but I certainly see the sort of transitionary definition of Bitcoin as money. So say Bitcoin money now, and if we're suggesting that money is what is a widely accepted medium of exchange, and we know that people do not denominate in Bitcoin when they sell things; they denominate in whatever fiat currency is popular with them. We can maybe say Bitcoin is not money today, and it has the potential to be money in the future. But yeah, if we're talking about, sort of the general concept and in the hypothetical where Bitcoin becomes widely used and popular, I think that, it has the potential to be money. The native units, the UTXOs, they have the potential to be transacted. But I think, again, it's sort of getting lost in some of the definitional squabbles, lose sight of just like, what is the point of Bitcoin and like, how do we grow adoption? And I think that is more so, as Vin was suggesting, that, this is a value transfer network. And I think, that is the core of what's going on here. And as we find new ways to grow this movement, we find out that you know, the thing that people like, the product market fit, the thing that people need Bitcoin the most for, not that they want to do it because there's some like basement dwelling, like libertarian hobbyist, that like people that need to do this, those are the people that are getting banned from banks, payment processors, or for whatever reason around the world. These people are getting like shut out of traditional finance. And so they're already like discovering cryptocurrency on their own. I often like, you know, I save screenshots of like various like kind of like due diligence that I do, just sort of, you know, where are these use cases for Bitcoin popping up? And I look at this one often. It's somebody posting on our digital nomads, and it's an Iranian dude, and he's talking about, hey, like, is there a way I can find clients? Like, I'm a, you know, a tech guy. You know, I do this, I do that. You know, the sanctions are really hurting, and it's like really tough to like get by, but like, you know, if I accept cryptocurrency, that would help me a lot. And he ends it by saying, if I'm able to do this work and if I'm able to accept cryptocurrency, that will allow me to be a better father and husband to my family. And that, like, that's why I get up in the morning, and that's what keeps me going on this, because like that's what people need right now. They need this value transfer network that is uncensorable. And then if they want to like off ramp into whatever fiat they have or whatever other store value that they want, for the time being, go right ahead. The thing that Bitcoin can do today and like provide like exponential value is this censorship resistant value transfer. So I think like that's where we need to move towards in the conversation. And then if Bitcoin is money and what that exactly means, like, can that come later down the road? Yeah. Like, and like wide adoption? Sure.
Well said.
So one thing that's, all right, so I'm sharing my screen. I'm showing you this. I don't know if this is a extensive list or exhaustive list, but all right. I think the part I can't really get over is, Vin, you're saying gold is money, but Bitcoin is not money. And I want to explore some of this on maybe some properties, and if we're missing some, I just want to see like, you know, the differences. Is that cool if we do this quick exercise?
Yeah, we can, but let's first say that it looks like what you're about to bring up. I know that's often called the properties of money, but those are actually the applications of money. So it's like a torch. A torch is a source, right? A flashlight is a source of light. Just like you're about to show that money is a medium of exchange, store of value. But a source of light is not the property of a flashlight. It's the application and use of a flashlight. So I know that people often call those the properties of money, but what they actually are is they are applications of money. But we can look at them if you want.
Well, hold on. If it's irrelevant, actually, this is more for me to explore ideas. Let's go over first. Can you give me a definition of money that satisfies gold, but maybe wouldn't satisfy Bitcoin?
The Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of money. Yeah, it's
is this?
It's a fine one.
Like is this? Like here?
I think that I think just scroll down and go to Merriam-Webster. I think that one's a little better. Something. Go ahead, you can read it.
Something generally accepted as a medium of exchange, a measure of value, or a means of payment. So with this definition, I would not consider gold to be a medium of exchange, a measure like maybe a measure of value, but I don't see too many people using it as payments.
So not right now, right? So gold is not really very good money right now, but gold has historically been money. I can
accept that.
Right. So it's just like the pound sterling, like obviously Great British pounds, the Great British pound sterling, no one would argue that is money. That is definitely money. So it is named after a pound of silver, sterling silver. So right now we don't use a pound of sterling silver as money, but we can see that in history, a pound of sterling silver most certainly was money, because they even still call their money the pound, even though it doesn't weigh a pound. So gold was historically something that was generally accepted as a medium of exchange, a measure of value, and a means of payment. Absolutely. So gold is one of the quintessential monies of the West.
I think Paul Stortz wants to come on. Are y'all going to get upset about that?
Paul, bring him on.
Okay.
He's going to definitely disagree with me.
He's going to disagree, I think, with everything. that
Yeah, well, that's
even I'm
Paul. That's
saying.
Paul. Yes,
And then he's going to start talking about some weird shit that I have no idea about that I can only just listen to.
probably. So it's up. So it's up to you.
Well, I'm asking. So,
Well, can we go? Can we go through the properties of money first? Because I
sure.
think that would just be or
But I
the
think
applications of money.
But I think I was just trying to get to an understanding. The understanding being like, okay, you're saying gold is a bad money right now.
Terrible, but
Historically was
yes,
used as money, but what you're saying is it's still considered money because of the more or less the historical context.
correct,
Bitcoin
correct,
has never really had that historical context. It isn't really
correct.
doesn't have like the money meme. And I think
That's right.
agree. I don't think I disagree with anything. So I don't know if I want to go down the list unless you want to.
Oh,
We
okay.
can.
No, no,
Um,
it's up to you. It's
I,
up to you, dude.
I guess I'm just so I just yeah. As soon as I understand your point, I'm good. I just was trying to clarify. Um, okay, let's I'm gonna stop sharing my screen so you can see me, right? But all right, I want to clarify. Bitcoin Cash is your favorite coin, right? Both of y'all.
Yeah, now I would say now. Yeah, it's what I work in on a daily basis. But I started with BTC in 2014.
Well,
So
sure.
yeah,
All Bitcoin Cash people
yeah,
started with BTC. I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
uh,
Yes, I prefer BCH.
okay. So all right, so now we're getting to like the weird farty part, as like Bitcoin Uncensored would call it. But what would you define as Bitcoin? What would you define Bitcoin as? Um, just to be very clear. And actually, I don't want I want y'all to answer it separately because I want to see the differences. Maybe
Okay, answer Peter, and I won't
yeah
listen. It's like we'll go into
yeah.
separate rooms, like an
Hey, just
interrogation.
can you just mute your headset then for
Yeah,
like and then Peter will give you the thumbs up.
I'll take my headphones off right now.
Okay, go
So
for it, Peter.
this will be good for your whiteboard. So why don't you draw a pizza up there?
Okay.
I I often
Pepperoni?
use this analogy.
Pepperoni
Whatever
pizza?
you want. This is actually a great aspect of what I'll jump into. But so you got a pizza. So I often like to describe Bitcoin as a pizza. So I define, for the analogy, it's that what I define Bitcoin as, it is the invention by Satoshi Nakamoto that was this blah, 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 digital cash, peer-to-peer, all the definitions you want to throw in there from the white paper. It utilizes proof of work and mining to, bring together a consensus. And Bitcoin is whatever shares the Genesis block, the code repo history, and on top of that, like retains sort of the properties we mentioned, whether we want to call it properties or applications earlier within of money. It retains those qualities to a degree. And fourth, it shares the culture and the community, the human element. There's a shared history of that. So what is a Bitcoin? It's a shared Genesis block ledger history, shared code repo history, shared sort of properties that were around from the founding days of it, and shared culture and human element. So like the people that were around back there, like the same sort of tenets and principles that people held as important, decentralization being one.
Okay.
So when you have those things, that's what make a Bitcoin. And people probably going to rake me over the coals about not getting like super technical about that.
No, that's cool.
I'm even willing to like throw those aside to a certain degree based on my pizza analogy. And so why I define it as that is because Bitcoin is open source. No one owns it. No one owns the idea. So Bitcoin is like a pizza. When Satoshi made Bitcoin, it was like the first pizzeria in Italy. Like the guy came up with it, and it was dough, cheese, and sauce. And then over time, there were like all these iterations, and then suddenly
those would be like versions of the pizza, right? Different versions of
exactly,
pizza.
Exactly.
Like New York style, Chicago style, deep dish, thin crust.
Exactly.
Okay,
and
gotcha.
so like thin crust. So it's like there was a debate on raising the crust size. So, but like nobody is, I mean, maybe some people do this, but nobody is running around and like claiming that like the people in Chicago are like scamming people out of their money. It's not pizza.
These
And it's like,
fuckers, these fuckers aren't
yeah,
really selling pizza. How can you support an establishment like this?
exactly. And like and there's people that
And
can
then,
even
well,
go
meanwhile, in
further.
Italy, they're like not even using like sauce or cheese or something.
Exactly. Or it's like,
Like the OG, like a pizza. I think in Italy is like way different
yeah.
than American
But it's
style.
like maybe it can't be a pizza if it doesn't have like mozzarella cheese. Like how many pizzerias are actually using like specific cheeses that like a lot more Italian OGs use as pizzas? So this is where I get to the point where we need to have this consensus around the idea of like no one owns Bitcoin. Bitcoin is really sort of like what we can all come to an agreement.
We're bringing Vin back in. Okay.
Awesome. So yeah, so that's why I say I think those 4 items that we listed before.
Mysterious items to Vin, right?
Items, cool. I can't see.
Okay, so Vin.
Okay. Yes.
All right, I'll just block it with my body.
What is Bitcoin?
What is WTF Bitcoin?
But first off, this is my absolute favorite question, and the fact that you're asking it means that you're somebody who actually wants to see Bitcoin be more valuable. So that's the first thing I want to say to you. Like, there's not enough people in the space asking the question, what is Bitcoin? There's far too many people in the space saying that they know what Bitcoin is. Okay. Bitcoin is a protocol. And I hate to and protocol means a set of rules that people agree to. Whoa, what's going on? Are we taking off?
Dude, we're
Are
going
we taking
to the
off?
fucking moon.
Okay, it's moon.
No, I just found out. All right, so we're talking protocol.
It's a protocol. It's a set of rules that individuals participating in an organization or network agree to follow. So the English language is a protocol. Base 10 mathematics is a protocol. All of these things are protocols, right? And Bitcoin is a protocol. And I think the white paper is a good place to start if we're asking what is Bitcoin and where I get my definition. I think it's reasonable. You can disagree, but I think it's reasonable that if you have something that is invented by somebody and that person takes the time to literally write a definition of that thing so that you know what it is in case you're asking, that it's probably a good place to go from that. So Bitcoin is a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. That's the title of the white paper.
Do I bring up the white paper real quick?
I don't know that. You can. I don't know that you need to.
Right.
But it's to say, what is Bitcoin? And in the introduction, second paragraph, first sentence, Satoshi is saying what he's creating, and he says it's an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust, allowing any 2 willing parties to transact directly with each other without the need for a trusted third party. And then he spends the rest of the paper talking about a way to do that using cryptography, using the ideas of proof of work with a particular transaction structure. And
so
what
that, pieces of those define Bitcoin? Is it everything specifically, or is it high level of those technical details?
I would say proof of work for sure. When he's talking about proof of work, he lays out the network structure in there. New transactions are broadcast to all nodes. Each node collects new transactions in a block. Each node works on finding a difficult proof of work for its block. All of that, if a system follows that, he also lays out the transaction structure, which is basically the Merkle tree transaction structure. So I think if a system has all of those things, it's arguably Bitcoin as a protocol. However, so this would include and really, I mean, like you could include because they share the protocol because they actually fork the code, Dash, Zcash, Smart Cash, all of these, they're all forks of Bitcoin Core, right? But I am remiss to call those Bitcoin except in the loosest of terms. And the reason why is because Bitcoin is also about the shared history beginning with the Genesis block of the inventor Satoshi Nakamoto. So I think that there's a spiritual component to it as well, because these things require, I do believe that these things require that there has to be this historical and spiritual component. This is just my own feeling. If somebody was to say Dash fits the protocol, it's got all the things from the protocol because it fits every single one of these, I'll be like, okay, you're right. You want to call Dash Bitcoin according to the white paper, okay, Dash is Bitcoin. But the fact that it's built on a shared history is important. And so those for me, those things that I will say are absolutely versions of Bitcoin are those that share a common history from the Genesis block and on which Satoshi Nakamoto, if he was to come back right now, could spend UTXOs of the UTXOs that were mined by Satoshi. If a blockchain has that, if Satoshi could come back and spend UTXOs on the blockchain,
that's really, I like that definition.
Then
Not
to me,
say I agree with it, but I just like how simple it is. If Satoshi can come back and spend his UTXOs on your chain, it's your Bitcoin. Okay,
it's a version of Bitcoin. For me, that's a very simple. It's just a very simple definition for me.
Like that is.
I think we need to find more. I think we need to find more quicker ways of explaining that, and I like that what you just said at the end. If Satoshi can come back and spend his UTXO or her UTXO on your chain, then it's a version. You would call it a version of Bitcoin, correct?
It's a version of Bitcoin.
So I think going over here now and going over to Peter's thing, I think pretty much y'all are aligned to a great deal. I think you're a little bit more explicit on the white paper tech stuff. I think Peter Ryan, you correct me if I'm wrong, I think he would primarily agree with you. But so he brought up 4 points specifically. Shared history, Genesis block, like what you were saying.
Right.
But what he brought up that's kind of interesting that I don't necessarily agree with is a shared code repo history. I think that's kind of arbitrary, but I guess I understand that because if you're going to have a shared history, then there's a good chance that a lot of other things line up. Qualities of founding days. I don't even know what I wrote. Qualities of something founding days, which kind of go to what you're saying as well. The spirit of the chain and like the history of Satoshi and stuff like that. And then the human element, which I kind of just wrote down, Peter, as like policies are implemented by people.
Right.
Which I think that's the only thing that I don't think you're really explicit on, which you probably agree with.
But it's baked into it, right?
Yeah,
like at the end of the day, it's like I think the history part is the people part. Really, that's the important part.
I think it is important to definitely call that out because when you look around, I think there is something about having like people that you can trace like histories back and see like, oh wow, like they were like an early adopter, like
you're saying individual personalities who are that the shared history is not just the blockchain, but it's like a human history as well. That's interesting.
This is where I'm going back to like Bitcoin as a central bank. I think, I mean, all these things work together. That no one, like, it's not just about the people, but all these things working together, coming in as ingredients to one recipe to make one thing. You know, I think the people and the culture those people, surround themselves with and keep to those tenets is important. So like, if you see like a bunch of ANCAPs were like really big into Bitcoin in the early days, and then they just sort of found their way to BCH, there's something about that seems like you can't just toss that aside. And that's why, that is not exclusively what makes Bitcoin a Bitcoin. But I think having that within the definitional, list that we made there is important because like people make an institution. And Bitcoin is an institution that's made by humans. So it's sort of, you need that, especially too, when then it's the more murky, the more sort of, intangible culture element. The idea again, like I didn't just say like the same people, it's like the ANCAP people. And so like, if there's a lot of ANCAPs opposed to like neoliberals, like, we're walking around, and this is what I often see is like, there's sort of like the neoliberal versus libertarian, and like they're often confused, especially to the normie. But even like, kind of like indoctrinaire libertarians can confuse these people as spokesmen. And you find them like, they might not be as adversarial to the state on certain issues, or they might not be as sort of consistent with sort of the morality that some of these original tenets that we're kind of all working toward were. So this is where I say the culture and the people should be held in some sort of importance among all the other things we talked about.
Is there this is interesting that you bring this up, because it's kind of like, is there a Bitcoin Gold community? I mean, I know it's started by Chinese individuals. Is it perhaps that we're just missing it? Like, is there some Bitcoin Gold community that all speaks Chinese, that I don't speak Chinese, and that maybe I just don't know because they're all communicating in Chinese on WeChat, and like not on crypto Twitter, and not on Reddit in English, and like they're like the Bitcoin Cash version but in China? Like, is it real? Or is what you're saying exactly right, that like the fact that there is no Bitcoin Gold community really speaks volumes as to, because Satoshi could spend his UTXOs on Bitcoin Gold, but I'm not really ready to be like, yeah, Bitcoin Gold is absolutely like legit. It's like it's right there on
so
the
it
edge
needs some
of
kind of
Bitcoin.
arbitrary threshold of human involvement, it sounds like, which is,
Yeah.
is kind of
I
hard
think
to
that's right.
define.
So if I could maybe throw some numbers behind this. One of the projects I worked on at CoinDesk was creating their little data explorer tool, where we tried to just grab a couple categories of data. So like on-chain, exchange data, GitHub developer data, social media data. So like, if you look at the social media data, so like Reddit posts, Reddit comments, number of subscribers, Twitter followers, like all these sorts of things, if we can basically lay out, here's an array of metrics we think have some sort of ability to communicate what the size and engagement level of a given coin community is, then we can actually compare and contrast different coins. And so when I was doing that, and again, like, even though I am preferential to BCH, this was done in the most objective way possible. What was happening when you were seeing the coins, obviously BCH suffers in price, it suffers in exchange volume, it suffers on-chain here and there, and here and there with developer. But like where it was totally an outlier compared to those other categories, it had just like this monstrous like overgrowth of community social media metrics, like, in terms of our BTC, in terms of what was going on in other areas. So this is where it's important maybe to think about, if you can like quantify BCH being sort of, this what a lot of people say, it's a tiny coin, or there's not that much volume. What is it? It's only like 3% of the hash rate of BTC. It's anywhere from like 10 to 20% of the on-chain volume that occurs on BTC. But when you see it start to have like 40% of the social media numbers of BTC, when on like some days it like goes to 120% of what is on BTC, like that says something. There's something about the, again, it could be a smaller community, but like the level of engagement there, it means that there is some like organic quality that's happening and that you can't discount. Whereas on Bitcoin Gold, it's like you don't see that, or on any of these other sort of minor forks.
So you ready for? So I like to think that I have a very unique definition of Bitcoin personally. I don't think
I'd like to hear it. Yes.
Well, I would say probably there are some people that share this, but for me, and I'm kind of going off of this off the top of my head, so I might be missing some stuff. But for me, it's, and y'all didn't really mention this, but it has to be using SHA-256 explicitly.
That's interesting.
So if it's not using SHA-256, I don't really consider it Bitcoin in terms of the proof of work part. I'm going to steal yours. Satoshi has to be able to come back and spend his UTXOs. So Satoshi has to be able to spend UTXOs. So in other words, there can't be anything that we do to disenfranchise that idea that this is like a store of value sound money, like where, we're going to like steal someone's funds or something. Does that make sense? Let's see. Yeah. So
Yeah,
I
that
want to
makes
say
sense.
another thing that y'all didn't mention: 21 million limit. Uh, and then we can get into this
I
more.
think that's the most arbitrary, obviously.
I think everything up here is arbitrary except the second one. Another one that's, I guess, for cryptography, whatever. Cryptography of the system has to be sound enough to where you don't disenfranchise someone. You don't make a system where it can easily be hacked. Like, you don't make a system where it's okay for the human element of it to get in the way where, we're just going to take all Satoshi's coins, or if you don't use your coins in 10 years, then it automatically goes to this, like, developer fund. No kind of thing like that. Like the kind of human kind of policy constitution of Bitcoin has to kind of stay sound in terms of existing choices that we've made. If that makes sense. So maybe some kind of like, guarantees have to kind of be there. Like you have to know it's not going away, that it's not going to drastically change overnight. Kind of policy kind of thing. Now, I do also want to say that it would have the ability to change via the human layer of this. So for instance, if you wanted to change, so this is maybe more of a current definition of Bitcoin that could change. This one would maybe be optional. This one is interesting because if we can get into this later, the 21 million stuff. But I think really maybe like if you want to talk about like maybe some of the specific texts of like elliptical curve cryptography, that would maybe be optional. But it would have to be done in such a way where there's like a overwhelming kind of, I guess, majority to change some of these things in terms of its ability to change.
So in
anyways.
the white paper, Satoshi says in proof of work, he says, and this is why SHA-256, he says, the proof of work involves scanning for a value that when hashed, such as with SHA-256, the hash begins with the number of 0 bits.
So I actually don't refer to the white paper at all, or Satoshi
really
in mine. I just like the idea that Satoshi could be anybody, Hal Finney, or whatever. Like,
sure,
myself, for instance, let's say 40 years from now, Bitcoin's still on a paper wallet or something, or gone, or on my, I think.
So let me ask you.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. So then, if let's say Peter Todd,
sorry, this was managed real quick. SHA-256. I also want to explicitly say most work on SHA-256. That's really important. So not just the fact that it's using SHA-256, but the most work. Yeah.
So if Peter Todd gets his way with this thing, and he's able, like he and Luke were with the block size situation, to like work his meme magic, which will be hard now that he's being investigated on this sexual thing. It's going to be hard for him. But if he's able to get his way, and they introduce inflation, like 1% inflation, I think is what he's been talking about. So the number increases to 21 million.
Or something. Yeah.
Right. Whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So the number 21 million changes, but there's a group of people who say we would like to fork to maintain the 21 million. Will you see on the fork that maintains the 21 million?
So the good thing about airdrops and Bitcoin Cash and all this shit, you don't have to pick a side. You can evangelize the side that you want, but you can play all sides and not have to take the risk.
But will you say that it is not Bitcoin? Will you say that the fork?
I think this is, so for me, I will be disenfranchised in terms of this is not what I bought into when I thought I was buying into Bitcoin. That's me personally.
Right.
I will still be bought into this inflationary coin, but to me it'll be Bitcoin with an asterisk of that's not the real Bitcoin. I remember back in the day we had real Bitcoin,
right.
But this shit, but I'll still be using it, but it's just, to me, I'm not going to think of it the same way. It's going to have an asterisk next to it. It's going to be called Bitcoin inflation.
So will you go around as the oddball at conferences and other video chats calling it not Bitcoin? and whatever.
Sure, yeah, fuck yeah. I mean, I'll still hold it. I'll still hodl the shit out of it,
Sure,
right?
absolutely,
But
sure,
I will
sure.
fucking troll. I will whatever. Like it's just you know. But well, first off, by then, hopefully, we're all wealthy enough to where we can just troll all day, and that's what we do for our jobs. So,
That is what I do anyway.
I'm not quite there yet, um, but I think like for me, I think for a lot of people, it was okay. Bitcoin purposely is keeping the blocks small. This is arbitrary. The fees are high. This is stupid. We should let markets kind of decide, block size
Right.
more or less. And to me, that was never a factor. That's why I didn't really jump on the Bitcoin Cash bandwagon as hard as maybe y'all did, because that for me was actually maybe a smaller part of it versus I just kind of didn't understand what was going on with like the coup. It just seemed really weird that okay, we had Garzik and Dreesen, uh, Hearn. We had some of these people that just
Yeah.
kind of just like, whew, to me that was more concerning um, than anything. But the actual technicals of it never really bothered me at all. And actually,
So
I actually respect a lot like what Peter Wille and Greg Maxwell are doing in terms of tech. But I just the human piece of it and how there was maybe dispute on what the project, the direction of the project. To me, that was more important than the actual tech itself.
so by your definition, then Bitcoin Cash is Bitcoin for
No,
you.
no,
Why?
because okay, no, you're bringing up a good point. I didn't. Oh wait, no, it's right here. It has to have the most SHA-256. So
Okay,
Bitcoin BTC has more
well,
SHA-256 than
it,
BCH.
but yeah, but that's not when we talk about most proof of work. That's not what we're talking about. Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin Cash has has replay protection. It's got a fork ID on
That's
it.
okay.
So right, but
A lot of times you could just think of hash as signaling.
what most so when we talk about the chain with the most proof of work, what's being talked about there is how you deal with orphan blocks. So it's the end. It's where Satoshi says nodes can leave and rejoin the network at will, accepting the proof of work chain as proof of what happened while they were gone. Where he's talking about the one that's got the way that you pick a block. So if you're being transmitted block as your node is syncing up or finding blocks, and you get this block, so it's actually a way of beating the of somebody else coming along and trying to sort of foil the system and do Sybil attack or any attack where they're putting
Sure.
out like a block that's not real.
Sure.
So basically what you're able to do is you're like, oh, I've got these two blocks that are both built on this. Which one is real? And then you look at the one that most of the nodes on your network have built on top of, right? It's not about
you're starting to get more into the Greg Maxwell definition of Bitcoin when you go that route.
Well, no, what I'm getting into is the reason why there's even this most
but Greg Maxwell's kind of philosophy is, the what nodes actually depict, what Bitcoin is, the software you run and all that kind of stuff, and your network of what is valid is really important versus I never mention valid proof of work. I just say proof of work.
So you're saying
really
that Bitcoin
to note.
So Bitcoin is whichever network. So in other words,
yes, it sounds fairly retarded, I know, but
so,
you have to hang with me on
so
this.
just let me create a scenario. If tomorrow Bitmain decided that they were going to switch all of their miners over and mine BCH, and they did that for a month, right? If all of let's say all of Antpool, or let's say
long enough to where it had more proof of work than Bitcoin.
To where the total amount of hash rate that had been devoted to that chain across history was so really because mind you, we're only talking about a 2-year gap, because until August 2017 both of these chains had the same proof of work.
It's not just 2 years because it's constantly getting more efficient to mine, so really it's it's anyways if everything stops
what I'm saying is that the difference in BCH and BTC is only the difference in hash rate as it's occurred over the last 2 years. Because in August 2017, they broke, and those two chains, when they split, at the moment that they split, had the same amount of, because they had the same history. So they had the same amount of proof of work.
Yep.
So you've got these 2 years. So what you're saying is that if let's say some giant miner, for whatever reason, this is a hypothetical, came in, started mining BCH, there was way more hash rate on BCH, such that, let's say 2 or 3 years from now, there was actually this moment where it was like, whoop, whether the price changed, whether anything changed, there was this moment where it was like, whoop, oh, all of a sudden, BCH is the one that has the most. Would you then say BCH is Bitcoin and BTC is not Bitcoin?
Of course.
Would you say so you would say BTC is not Bitcoin at that point?
Of course, and this is where Greg Maxwell and I disagree. So I would say, so first off, all this. So I also want to say all this funnels up into market cap should be correlated with this. If it's not, then there's weird shit going on. But all of this should be correlated with market cap. So I think it's going to be very obvious to the world if BCH starts getting that much mining, the value of BCH will be much higher as well compared to Bitcoin. And it will be, sorry, when I say Bitcoin, BTC. Sorry, I'm so brainwashed. But what I'm trying to say is all this will funnel up in the market cap. This will be very obvious to everyone. You won't need to like question it. It'll just be very obvious. Bitcoin Cash. You won't call it Bitcoin Cash. It'll just be Bitcoin at that point. The exchanges will buy in. The exchange, that's another thing. Exchanges. I mentioned this on Twitter. I don't know if you thought it was interesting, but to me, a good litmus test is exchanges. Exchanges want as many traders. They want, they don't want to confuse traders on Bitcoin Cash versus Bitcoin. They just want to make money off of you and make you trade Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin. And to me, a good litmus test is market cap, exchanges, how people are like right now. If you go on the street and someone starts talking about Bitcoin, and I know maybe Bitcoin to someone else is, it's the conglomerate of all these projects and all these versions of Bitcoin, but really it's very likely that they'd be talking about BTC.
Absolutely. No
so
question.
Right now the meme of Bitcoin is definitely with BTC. And for me, when hash rate starts to go away, that will correlate with market cap and it'll be very obvious BCH is actually Bitcoin at that point.
So I want to just counter signal the market cap because I don't deny that market cap is a great signal and it's a great tool for communicating across wide disparities in intellectual capacity and time constraints for people that do not want to study this or they can't. However, I think if the point of our discussion is to determine, what makes a Bitcoin and what is the truth, I think that is where the meme of the market will decide. And, the market has decided. I think it falls through the cracks because I think this is a failing of people to understand what a market is. A market is not democracy. 51% does not of a market cap dominance, does not describe
it's putting your money where your mouth is. It's power of money. It's not just it's people times their value that they can put in.
So if there's let's say for simple math, 5% market cap BCH to BTC. So of that market cap, there's people in there that are really committed to BCH. Their truth is that BCH is Bitcoin. And so the fact that there's a disparity between the size does not indicate, whether who's wrong in that matter. It just indicates sort of what is more common. And this is the thing that, we can go back to, Benjamin Graham, which I like to bring up in value investing is the herd is a thing. And, and I believe that Austrian economics does not teach us that the herd and market boom and bust outside of sort of the credit creation aspect of it. But people can be wrong on investment decisions and that can reveal themselves later on. So the idea that believing in the herd at the present time is the best way for us to determine what is Bitcoin. I think that's problematic. I think we can say, market cap is a great communication tool, but that's not actually answering what is Bitcoin, because what is Bitcoin is different to different people.
And I mean, we could go to something like, Catholics versus Protestants, and somebody saying, well,
the real Christians.
Who are the real Christians? And honestly, the Catholic Church, the word Catholic literally means universal. So they're making the statement up front that their church is the only real church.
They're Christian
genuine.
core.
Right, they are, and so it's like there's 1.1 billion Catholics, right, and there's 800 million Protestants in the world. Those are the worldwide totals, and so for somebody to, it's close now, right? It obviously wasn't close when Martin Luther started out.
Probably more Protestants in America than there are Catholics.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In certain countries, there are definitely more of one or the other. But I think that no one would say, okay, we're going to define Christianity. And I don't think that anybody would think that there was much utility in saying, well, part of my definition is it's whichever church has the most members. That's part of my definition, right? Whichever has the most believers in it, that's how we define Christianity.
But
and so it's like you could say that
information. If you have literally no other information, it is something to go off of. But it could.
Well, it's meaningful.
It could be very wrong. But if it's all you have to work off of, I would say the majority of the time, if you're put in a bunch of situations, like let's say 100 situations, and you just want to do what the majority do, I would say the majority of the time, the majority is right. Not I think 100% of the time, but
I don't think so.
No, I think Peter's idea is actually interesting in that it's kind of the reverse. And in that way, I would almost agree with your definition, Michael, because it's kind of the reverse. It's like Bitcoin gold. It's not necessarily what is Bitcoin, but it's like what is definitely not Bitcoin. So what is definitely not Bitcoin is just some guy in a basement who forks Bitcoin Core, who's got the same transaction history, who's doing shots 256, who's doing all of this, but he's the only one mining, right? That's not Bitcoin. So it's almost like it's a good measure because you're like, okay, at least there has to be a community behind it that has some substance. So it's like even if there were 100 million Protestants, even if there were 50 million Protestants, even the Mormons, right? That it's like, is it a cult or is it a religion? Like, is it a legit religion? It's like, well, dude, there's like millions of them. So I think that I think you're on to something actually, Michael. Like I actually would like to add that to mine as well. To say not necessarily that it's the most work and the highest market cap, but something like that it has it, and it's hard to like quantify it, but there's a qualitative thing that it has a community, an active community, and active dedicated miners at an institutional and industrial level who are putting their resources and capital into it. Like for me, I would say that that's definitely true. I won't say that only the one that's has the most is Bitcoin, but I would exclude all of the ones that don't have.
So just to like use that and jump right off of there. So let's just say we exclude market cap, but as a proxy for what you're describing as sort of like the investment capital.
I also want to say we can do that because to me, most work and market cap should always be correlated, and if they're not, then this kind of my brain blows up. So that's an assumption that I'm making with this.
Okay, well, I think they can definitely be uncorrelated, but
yeah, if they are, then my definition of Bitcoin is flaky because this all assumes that these inputs create highest market cap, and if highest market cap doesn't have these inputs, then I'm going to have to rethink everything because to me, these things should be correlated.
True. I mean, like the thing there is just like, market cap is determined by speculation, and speculation doesn't care about any of our definitions. So it's like, if somebody knows something that's going to just jack up demand, like some, trading house is going to open up the floodgates to retail investors, which are, any day now. Somebody has good prospects there, like that has nothing to do with anything technologically or anything sort of culturally that we're talking about here. That just like has to do with speculation and demand creation.
Yeah,
but what
I think I'm okay standing firm on this though. If something did just have a bunch of speculation and still meets these other criterias, then I would, like for instance, Satoshi would be able to spend off of it, yada yada whatever. Then I would be very surprised.
Sure. So I just want to get Vin's answer on a quick question. So if let's say we're excluding market cap because it can be it could possibly be too faulty with rampant speculation. But if we're trying to find a proxy for like that investment capital, that productive capital that's going in to actually make this happen from the ground, the grassroots, is like, let's say, okay, total amount of venture capital put into various organizations within each coin community. And so when you look at that, and you can just say, okay, we can have like a yardstick measuring contest. And if the venture capital of BTC is greater than BCH, does that mean BTC is Bitcoin and BCH is not?
I'm not, I mean, yeah, for me, I'm not, I don't believe that there is, I mean, my definition is an inclusive definition, right? Like I'm more concerned about excluding the things that are not Bitcoin than trying to narrow down my definition so that it only includes one Bitcoin, which like, I think there's something there that's a little bit disingenuous. Like, I think that if what you're after in your definition, if at the end of the day, what you need your definition to do is end you off with only one chain, then I don't think you're approaching it with intellectual honesty. So like, because I don't think that it's self-evident, you're almost starting with your conclusion. Like, if you do that, you're almost starting with the assumption that Bitcoin can only be one chain.
I don't think that's disingenuous, though. I think that's just a preference on. I want Bitcoin to be defined as one chain. I don't think
That's fair.
I think we're also conflating that that maybe someone like, let's say, with my stance would be unhappy with multiple projects that are successful. So I think there's a lot of I guess you'd call them maximalists that would be like, one chain to rule them all, but I don't think those things are definitely conflated with just defining Bitcoin as one chain.
Do you think that
se.
something that is, do you think that something that is not Bitcoin within your definition can be valuable in terms of delivering, being a part of delivering sort of the vision that we discussed at the beginning that brought us all into the space? Like, or is only the one chain that is Bitcoin the only tool that can be used to deliver that vision that we all taught, that sort of libertarian, free market sort of moved away from these intermediaries and the coercion of the state? Do you think that that can only be the one Bitcoin that can do that? Or do you think that other things that don't fall into your definition can be tools to do that?
Absolutely, other tools are possible. I think right now, Bitcoin's made the biggest strides in terms of the stuff I'm focusing on. But I think absolutely 100% other projects can be tools to be used to reach, essentially freedom. So
so if something could be a tool to do,
including stuff like
a shit coin or a scam or denigrate the people involved and call them scammers, like what?
I think all that does,
what do you think about that?
I think all that does is it just I think when people get like super emotional about that kind of stuff, all they're doing is signaling which side they've sold. And if you don't sell any side, then you can be a little bit more objective about it.
I think what it also is potentially signaling is that they're kind of giving away the game. Their hostility is indicative of the threat that the competition poses. So like, they are not having the same hostility to Bitcoin, gold, or any of the other forks. They are having hostility to the most likely competitors to the Bitcoin name. And
well, the biggest threat to Bitcoin in general, it used to be Ethereum, and it's hard to say, like, if Ethereum starts picking up steam, it's going to be Ethereum. If Bitcoin Cash starts picking up steam, it's going to be Bitcoin Cash.
I mean, I'm not sure that Ethereum represents, in my mind now, I don't think Ethereum represents a threat to Bitcoin at all. Like, I think that
so in terms of speculation,
it's a different thing. Yeah, I mean, in terms of speculation, but I mean,
no.
I'm saying in terms of stopping the vision. Right, but
go up is the most important piece of this. And if you're putting your money into another project, how dare you? Because I only have coins on this chain, and if you put money into another chain, you are a infidel.
It's a very short time preference.
But you
it's
know,
a very short. I do.
Maximalist manifesto is all chains are bad, not just Bitcoin Cash, and definitely Ethereum is completely shit. So if you think, like, I mean, in 2017, I think during the almost flippening, I think Ethereum was public enemy number one, right?
Sure.
Well, but it's only an enemy to number go up. And the number go up, the number go up thing is such a short time horizon. Like the time preference there is really, really bad. So for me, like
Welcome to Bitcoin.
yeah, well, I don't know. No, and so maybe I'm an outlier because for me, this is very much like a multi-generational project for me. Like for me, this gives my life so much meaning. And like the thought that I have two daughters who are very young. Like one is 3, she's about to be 4, and one is like almost about to be 6 months. And the thought for me that they could like be involved in Bitcoin when they're in their 20s or 30s, and that it could give them some level of freedom, and that I was a part of it, like that maybe even something that they're running, some software that they're running has some code that I made a commit to back in the day, and like that's how they're earning their paycheck. The thought of that, to me, that's what gets me up in the morning. But then I also know that like if that becomes a reality, like number go up is a foregone conclusion. And so like I'm gonna be very like making that a reality is what makes number go up, and then I'm rich to boot, right? So it's like you get the best of both worlds. But if I'm like, you're a threat because next year I might not have 10x'd, then to me that's like, wow, dude, you're like, you may as well go get some scratchers or something. Like, what are you playing lotto, I guess?
Yeah.
So anyways, I think we can kind of like agree to disagree, which I like. I think we all kind of have like our own definition. I think mine's like obviously a little bit different. But I think, we still have harmony. I would say
We're all
that's
on the same team,
pretty much
clearly.
correct.
We
And
Yeah.
I'm wondering what's your take on. So I would say, obviously everyone in the crypto space has thick skin on Twitter because you have to. But would you say, I'm curious on how you thought I came off on Twitter before we did this. Is is Twitter a good way to debate this stuff? Is it better to do like these kind of podcasts and talk about stuff? Like, what was your impression of me? Was I just a cultist? Am I still a cultist? Like, I'm curious there.
You're like a lay member of the church. Like you're not a priest. You're not a priest, but like and you don't go to church every Sunday. Like during football season, you don't go to church, but like you go for Easter, and you go for like the Christmas service, and
Oh my God.
and you wear a little crucifix, like, but other than that, you're like a pretty nice guy. Like you go out, we can have a beer,
Okay,
like, Bible beat me
I'll
and all
take
that
it.
type of stuff.
I'll take it. Ryan, what have you seen? I'm just curious in terms of discussions. What have you found effective? Have you found anyone that's a maximalist that you've been able to bring over to be pro Bitcoin Cash? I'm curious if
I don't think
that's
like
even
there's,
possible. Like,
yeah, I
I'm
don't
just
know if
curious.
there's,
Maybe you can give me a little snippet of, how, like, first, what would you define me as? Because I have an identity crisis right now, apparently. And what would you define me as? And what would you say needs to happen? I don't know. Just give me something.
I think you're ecumenical. I think that there's something, from what I know about you, you are the guy that puts on the Tab conference. And one of the notable presentations that was gained a lot of eyeballs from that was the debate that Zach Vole hosted between Colin Enstead, Kevin Pham, and
Daniel.
yes, Daniel.
Daniel Kraywitz, yeah.
And it was BCH versus BSV, and then Zach was sort of a BTC stand-in, even though he was the moderator. So I think by having that debate, it shows like you're sort of like in this mode of, okay, you might have the allegiance to BTC, but like you are open to the new ideas. You're not opposed to having people come in and have the discussion and play this out.
Well,
Now, yeah, go on.
I was going to say, dude, before I was just going to be like, okay, we're going to have this debate about Bitcoin versus Bitcoin Cash, and then all of a sudden, Kevin Pham and Daniel Kraywitz just fucking go off the deep, and I'm like, well, shit, this is going to be. I want to learn about this. So, I mean, it's really like people like like Daniel Kraywitz really make me scared shitless to ever pick a side on this. Like, it just seems like way too much risk for only like maybe, oh, instead of one yacht I'll have two yachts. It just doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense.
Well, I don't get why there's such of a hang up. Like, why can't there be more than one Bitcoin? Like I still give the inheritance to BSV, even though
Oh
I'm not a fan
no,
of them.
no, I just meant like
They give me
selling.
Bitcoin. Yeah.
Daniel would make me scared selling any of the forks because
Oh,
it's
because
just
the indexing,
because
his whole thing. Yeah.
well, my whole
Yeah.
thing was okay. Yeah, Daniel's really smart. You know, he's given this really good advice, like just be dumb, hold all forks, whatever. And then he fucking goes off the deep end, like, no, sell all your stuff. BSV is it. I'm like, wait, what? What? Now I don't know what to do. I'm going with version one of Daniel Kraywitz, which was hold all the forks. I think
Yeah.
version
Good.
two
Good call.
of Kraywitz is I'm still trying to figure out. But no, I'm
Any
happy that you
truth.
pointed that out. But
And more truth. Yeah.
I mean, I would like to say, you know, a lot of people think that I'm anti BTC. It's weird that I get that from people, and then I'm like, can you show me? Can you
well, you're
show
not
me an
maximalist.
example? Well, I'm
If
like, can you
anything
show
that
me an example? Well, people are like,
anybody, you're on my
I got
podcast. You're obviously
well, I I got this yesterday where somebody was like, well, you've got coin text and you say that you support Bitcoin, but you don't support BTC. And then I was like, yeah, we do. We have like for the whole year. And then like I'll go back and I'll say, for me, honestly, I and I have said this over and over and over. If BTC did a 4 meg increase, an increase to 4 meg blocks, that it would be over. Actually, BCH would not even exist. Neither would BSV. Like even if Adam Back's advice that or his suggestion that he had early on in the whole scaling debate, by his numbers, we would be at 8 megs right now on BTC, and there we would not even be having this discussion. So, like for me, the problem that I have is with maximalists, with actual individuals and their mindset of so many wrong and I won't say wrong, but what I will say is inconsistent. They're logically inconsistent and fallacious views on a lot of things. And I just think that those views are toxic to the community. I don't want to use the word toxic. It's not good. They're not, you don't want to have inconsistent memes in your head, but I don't think you have those. You seem to be somebody who's thinking for themselves. And so I think that you're kind of like an ideal Bitcoiner. Like you're exactly the type of person that I think, regardless of which way you choose, right? I think that you're a representation. I don't need everybody to pick to prefer the one that I prefer. But so long as you've fucking thought it out, like you've actually thought it out. And that makes you different than like 99% of the people who, in my opinion, the people who are in BTC who are public. I don't think that that's a common case.
most people. That's the other thing that's kind of weird. I have a buddy in Atlanta who talks about this and this and this, and it's all Twitter personalities. And all the Twitter personalities, you know, it's kind of weird. It's like they found this weird thing where people will listen to them. And
Exactly.
no, they're not technical. They
Exactly.
don't have like any like thing to their name, and no industry experience, no company. No, it's just they're literally a Twitter personality. Like that is what they are, and it's just like I, di- I don't know. I guess it's like I don't know. They're
The question is, are those individuals, if I want
or
to see the vision that I
influencers.
was
They're
talking about,
influencers.
are those individuals going to it does their being pushed forward and their presence and their being celebrated, does that bring us closer to the goal of Bitcoin mass adoption faster?
And Twitter personalities, right? And I'm going to be inviting them to TabConf as well. But dude, they're almost like the jesters for the King's Court. The only people that listen to them are people already in the space. I don't think there's a lot of like fresh blood that ends up finding these influencers. And I could be 100% wrong about that, but I feel like whenever I look at the threads, it's the
Right.
same 20 guys, it's the same 40 guys that just keep pumping this shit. And and you know, what I feel like what I'm doing in Atlanta is I'm reaching out to colleges and universities and going out to different tech groups and bringing new people together every single week. And I feel like that's what I'm trying to do. I feel like I'm trying to do my part right here in Atlanta, and I feel like these influencers maybe instead need to find new blood in a meetup group. And maybe I don't know. It,
I
it
guess
really,
the
it
I
really
guess
makes me wondering, like, what the influencers, what the Twitter personalities, what value they actually serve, to be honest. Because I feel like a lot of people that listen to them and follow them are just people already in the space.
Yeah, well,
but that's go ahead. Go.
yeah, I think I totally agree with you, and I'm noticing myself that it's almost like everyone needs to stop talking to everyone else, and you need to get outside to newer folks. But like the function of a Twitter personality and the sort of the dogpiling of positive post or negative post that happens. I mean, that serves a function of like that keeps Anthony Pompilano going on CNBC, like that keeps Meltone going on, that keeps Jimmy Song being able to like, do whatever he does, author books, run like seminars, all these people, the ability for them to sort of maintain that status quo allows them to have these positions where they can sometimes break into, sort of the mainstream. And so, for instance, like Matt Odell and Marty Ben are probably an example of these like Twitter influencer people, because they retain sort of the dog pile of the people existing in the space. That's able to allow them to like do the Bitcoin Magazine conference, be like presenters, and then because that happens, that allows CoinDesk to write an article about it. And because that happens, that allows Bloomberg to write an article about it. Now suddenly Matt Odell and Marty Ben are in Bloomberg and they're reaching mainstream audiences with their narrative. So I think there's a point of like that dog pile, and there's a point to like engage in it to sort of like break the cognitive dissonance that's going on and like provide some different viewpoints. But yeah, to what you're saying, like in terms of like what we're all really after here, it's like it's what you're doing. You're going to colleges, you're meeting new people, and like that's where the adoption growth is going to come from.
I'm curious because you bring up and all valid points that you brought up. I actually like the fact that you gave justice to Twitter people, Twitter personality influencers. On what would you estimate is the number of like actual influencers that matter that end up making a difference versus just people in the way? Like, dude, we don't need another just person into Bitcoin that has like, that's, I don't know, like, what was it? Is it like, is it a small percent, or is everyone pretty much doing their part on a spectrum? Or like,
Well,
I'm curious
think
to know your opinion on that.
I think it's a scrum, and it's like you got to punch your way. And as someone that's been criticized myself as like, you don't need to be here, you're a bad researcher, you're a bad this, like you're dumb. I've won the dumbest crypto tweet award like multiple times in the past like 3 weeks. So as someone that is getting shout out like that, I think it's part of it. Like you got to take the hits. And what happens is through the interactions, especially the casual observers on the sidelines, they start to realize, maybe there's something here. And what I will say of those observers is that I am seeing something, and I could be distorted, but I feel like I'm talking to enough people. I'm interacting publicly. I'm in Telegram chat rooms. I'm doing all this stuff. Emails are going back and forth. There is something occurring. There's a new wind blowing where like people that maybe were just implicitly BTC maximalist and maybe not even as strong, but just, oh yeah, BTC, that's the best thing. They're coming to realizations that, there's something off here. There's something like, I think the INX story is a great example of this. There are so many people that were like pro BTC that are like scratching their heads over how can Jameson Lopp, Samson Mao, Whale Panda, all have been these super hardcore BTC maximalists, yet they're like totally, behind the scenes doing like an Ethereum token. Like, how does this add up? So I think there's points of breakage with the narrative.
Is doing an Ethereum token?
Oh, dude, you didn't see this story, bro?
All
of them. Oh, like within the last 3 days, the block broke it. I mean,
bro, I actually work a job that I'm like,
dude,
this one's
like pretty
8 to 8.
It's pretty ridiculous, dude. Hundreds of thousands of dollars each of these guys has in Charlie Lee, all the whole Magical Crypto group plus Jameson Lopp, basically.
Fluffy Pony in it too.
Wait a minute,
Fluffy Pony.
Tell me what happened.
Yeah. So there's basically an ICO. I don't know what the company that what it does, but these guys all are investors, and I think even board of directors for
View for the whole. Wait, it says okay.
yeah. Fluffy
All
Pony
right, so
put in
I'm
like
pulling it up for everyone.
$900,000.
Oh, only 900K. That's like he missed buying a new watch.
Right.
That's how much like the watches cost that he gets. Okay, let's see what we got here. INX Limited, a crypto exchange started. Oh, it's an exchange. Plans to what? So it's an exchange that has its own token, like BNB token, like
Correct.
Binance. Oh,
Yes.
okay.
CRC20.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
probably going to make them some money.
Well, if that's what they said, they're like, of course it's going to make us some money. But everybody's like, wait a minute. Wait, why are you? Now I understand Fluffy Pony because it's like, well, there's no doubt that he will invest his time and money in other coins. That's self-evident, right? Like that's how he has $900,000 to spend.
Yeah, I mean, when you have $900,000 to spend, I mean, why else? Why not just put your money into a
I think that and I'm not even, and
exchange.
Charlie Lee as well, but I think the fact that Samson and Jameson Lopp, I think those are the two in particular where it's like you did what? You invested in it, especially Samson, who has talked so
The
much shit
securities
on
will be
Ethereum.
represented as an ERC20 token. You know what fucking blows my mind is why they didn't use Liquid. Is Liquid shit?
Of course it is.
So why wouldn't they use Liquid for this token?
Well, like you just said, it's a signal of which side you've sold, right?
Well,
That's the
no,
signal.
I think what this really says, it's not necessarily the side that they sold, but really they're worried about maybe regulation on the Liquid chain because it's federated and maybe not decentralized enough. I don't know. Speaking of which, can we jump to one
I don't
quick
know.
point?
Go ahead.
One
Sure.
thing that none of us brought up, and I'm really kind of like maybe happy about this. I don't know. I don't know if y'all disagree. We did not bring up centralization as a defining feature of Bitcoin. I don't know
Oh
if
yeah,
that.
that's
I don't know if that's
bullshit.
like okay. Well, see, like I am like I always feel like I'm in the minority when I say that. Like I don't care if it's one miner that's mining
Yeah.
all the blocks. I would still call that Bitcoin. And a lot of
Well,
people
and
say
it would
no.
still be decentralized too.
Well,
So
see, I'm different. I think it could be completely centralized, completely 100% centralized with just one miner, Bitmain or something, and I would still call that Bitcoin because Bitmain at that point is incentivized to be the best actor it can because it's mining Bitcoin. And
well, Bitcoin started with only one miner, right? So Bitcoin, no, seriously,
well,
Bitcoin's
yeah,
inception.
I
So it
agree.
must. So by that, it must.
So that's why I say that if Bitcoin has always been decentralized, right? If Bitcoin has always been decentralized, then one miner, it is still decentralized because Bitcoin is decentralized by design. And that design is that anyone else can start mining. So even if Bitmain was the only miner, as long as they're running Bitcoin the way that it is now, somebody else could invest a ton of money and come in as a competing miner, and then another, and then another, and then another.
Well,
they could never stop. They could only increase their hash power, which is what you want, right? Like that it increases, but they could never stop somebody from coming in. That's how Bitcoin is decentralized. It isn't. They haven't thought about it. That's why.
Really the only I want to ask. So we might be getting a little long in the tooth. I don't know how long y'all usually go for, but
That's whatever. This is interesting,
the,
actually.
the,
So
the one thing I really want to focus on is this one with you guys because I think that if y'all use your superpowers together, you can. Let me show the feed. Y'all can maybe. I know this is reversed for the feed, but this says 21 million. I would really like to understand more of the philosophy behind this one. But before we get here, I want to actually ask y'all maybe some Bitcoin Cash questions. If that's cool.
go ahead.
All right. So actually wrote some of them down. So first off, we kind of established a little bit ago. Bitcoin Cash is both of y'all's favorite project, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct. Yes.
So, and this is just whatever. Just go with it. Can we talk about who gave Bitcoin Cash?
So he was that is the biggest maximalist myth
Hey
of
man,
all
I'm
time.
asking.
Roger wasn't even involved for like months,
You know what? You know
like
what's funny?
months after.
That's so true. He wasn't. He was actually on the fence for a while.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So when people are like, Roger created Bitcoin Cash, it's just historically inaccurate. It's just absolutely not true. It was called Bitcoin Cash from the moment that it forked, and
So would you
I
say it
mean,
was really the development team behind it that kind of
I
gave it its term?
so ABC was the first. I'm not sure if I don't think BU had an implementation to start, and I know that via BTC, I don't know how it's pronounced. They were the first ones to mine it. So somewhere between them, someone in that group said
Wasn't
we could probably.
wasn't Jeff Garzik one of the early developers with Bitcoin Cash?
I don't know whether he was. I mean, Amaury Sachet is the person who's the lead. I could ask
Mhm.
Amaury, like we could find out who named
Yeah.
it, but it was somebody associated with that early
Is
group.
it
For
is
sure.
it safe to say that this was really developer driven?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was. I mean, it was. Yeah, 100%.
Okay, cool. So this is just me trying to learn more about Bitcoin Cash. So for some reason, my memory's failing. Like even like I kind of fell into the trap that you were just talking about, like Roger Ver, right? Like obviously, Roger Ver. It took him. He was on the fence for a while. He was actually a fair weather supporter before he actually was a
That's
supporter
right.
of it. And
That's right.
yeah, I'm actually you're refreshing my
I
mind about
think it
that.
was after 2x failed. After
It's
2x failed, it was basically when he
yeah.
jumped ship.
So this you know what this might be the example of a Mandela effect.
No, it's not. What it's an example of is it's an example of effective propaganda and indoctrination. If you say a lie
Well,
often
whatever,
enough,
man. Shit, I was trying to be funny. Fuck. Um, so let's talk about Bcash, which the first time I think I heard that was maybe from Bitcoin Core, and I define Bitcoin Core as just core developers on BTC. But is Bitcoin Cash being called Bcash? Is that offensive to you?
it never has been to me.
Is who is it offensive to? Because I've
Obviously,
never met a Bitcoin Cash person that's been offended by Bcash.
I think it's not the word that's offensive. It's the
Well, that's
tone. It's the tone because it's really what
that's
it is.
every
It's
word
more.
that makes you upset. It's not the word; it's what you mean behind the word and the way you
Yeah,
say
yeah.
it.
So
I mean,
so
that's
it's a
everything.
so what it is it's a signal, right? It's a signal. So like I'll give you an example. I was at Anarcho Vegas. I was speaking on a panel, and then afterwards was at like this party and was talking to somebody, and they're like, "Oh, so so you're into Bcash then? You're into Bcash?" And it's like, I see what you're doing right there. Like you made you're approaching me. I have not done anything to you specifically. I have not said anything to you. I have not tried to upset you in any way. I don't know who you are.
It's like
I'm a
they're
nice
purposely trying to trigger you. Is the part that it's like, dude, what the fuck?
exactly. And it's like it's not that it triggers me, it's that you're trying to trigger me. And it's like that's the part that I'm like it, where I'm like, well,
It's the
obviously
act of
you're an
trying to trigger me that's triggering me.
well because what you're saying to me is that you're an asshole. Because only an asshole so only an asshole goes up to somebody that they don't know, that they've never met, they've never encountered, and tries to trigger that person. If you do that, no matter in what way you do it, you're an asshole. So you should expect me to behave as though you're an asshole and to treat you like an asshole. And so I think that that's really what it is it's like I'm not particularly triggered by it, but the only reason you're using it is to trigger me. That's the only reason you're using it. But it's also an in-group thing, right? Just like every slur, every sort of the every slur really, every racial slur is racial or ethnic or national. All of those things are ways of signaling out group and in group. And so it's like I really don't care if everybody who's around Bitcoin Core, when they're with each other, are calling us B
Well,
cashers.
I was gonna ask, do Bitcoin Cash people behind closed doors say Bcash?
No,
I just
no.
think it's funny that it's like Peter. Have you ever found any, I guess, asshole or twerp that is just saying Bcash trying to trigger you, or like
Yeah,
in
of course.
person?
Yeah, I think it's funny though that like you immediately went to twerp. Like unconsciously, all these people are twerps. And like someone that says Bcash is a twerp. Like they're not like a good
Well,
faith like dude trying to like talk to you.
well, I guess going back to Vin's thing, like I think for me, like especially in person, I try to be respectful, or at least try to at least make it be open. I'm being sarcastic if I want to be that way. But have you ever had someone like in person try to be, maybe a little hostile?
Well, I think I think when that has happened, I think it's because people are unclear with like the room that they're in. So like, especially before I became more vocal, let's say like I don't know, like this past spring, I became more vocal, you could say less objective.
You came
I
out.
think,
You
yeah,
came out of the proverbial
like,
Bitcoin closet.
yeah, but like in the New York circles of like Bitcoin meetups or whatever, or like various chat rooms that like I swam in those, and people have assumed I'm a BTC maximalist, and during a certain time, like I just kind of kept a little quieter and didn't really reveal. I mean, I've been pro BCH since the fork. I was really interested when it was all going down. But like I was just like cool as a cucumber, like not going to like rock the boat, and just okay, let's see what you think and how you express yourself.
So you're playing a little incognito, like not showing all your cards.
Yeah, I was
Okay.
especially as I was working my way and getting to know things in the space. I wanted to see what people were doing with their interactions, and I find it interesting that it's like when you think, oh, you're a BTC maximalist too, it's like, oh, okay, let's use all our code words together. But then like if I do start to push back and I'm like, oh, actually, you know, Bitcoin Cash isn't that bad an idea. Roger Ver is not actually that bad a dude. You can see their face.
Fucking
It's almost
sellout.
like,
What kind of
wait a
Bitcoin
minute, I've been
wait a
talking to you
minute.
for an hour. We've been best buddies. How are you saying this now? And so this is where these people like, I don't know if they're being intellectually honest or they just want like a friggin' clubhouse to pal around in.
Well, dude, I think that's actually like a really good sign. Like I've always thought that a lot of this is a really good sign, and I've said it for a long time that it's if you've got people playing this in-group out-group thing when they actually don't have to. Like this is the weirdest thing to me is that I've had people do this when there's like nobody around, which is super weird. Like I remember an interaction I had with Tone Vase where I was just talking to just me and him, right? Just we're talking at PorkFest, and he's doing all the things, and I'm like, I could understand if we were in front of a camera right now. I could understand if we were up on the stage like we're going to be like 3 hours from now having a debate about this. But like you're sitting here just in front of me, just me and you, and you're doing the thing. So what that tells me is you are fully bought in. Like you are not in on the joke. You have going to take that we have to become like little nations almost in order for this thing to really take off. Like we've really got to bring people into our in-group and really be like, okay, you're part of the nation now. Like your loyalty is to BTC and it needs to be to BTC. Like
what?
that.
But that's what look, if it that's how do churches grow? How do nations grow?
You need loyal cultists is what you're making it sound like.
That's the only way for organizations to grow. Yeah.
By the way, I just want to circle back to the point, Mike, that you brought up about, when did Bitcoin Cash first arise? Who first called it Bitcoin Cash? Blah, blah, blah. So, like, I found the announcement post on Bitcoin.
Can you post the link? I'll bring it up for everybody.
Yeah, let me post that there. So, like, this is like the first official, like, declaration.
So July 22nd, and then it launched officially on August 1st, right?
Yes. And so if you scroll down to the description right at the bottom,
so about
you'll see
9 days. So about 8 or 9 days later, or about 10 days later.
Sure. And so this says Bitcoin Cash is split from Bitcoin with a protocol upgrade to fix on-chain capacity. If Bitcoin Cash gets majority of proof of work, then it becomes
de facto Bitcoin, which kind of goes with my definition.
It does, in fact, yes.
Sure, but I think I'm calling this more so out to
So
suggest
this 100% goes with my definition pretty much, and I think the
but I'm
developers
saying,
at the time agreed.
yeah. So regardless of like if this occurred or not, what I'm saying is that baked into the cake from the beginning, like Bitcoin Cash was like not an alt, like it was not believed to be an altcoin. Like it, the point of it was we're shooting the king, we're coming at the king, and
so
we
they're
missed,
pretty
now we're
much so that's interesting. Pretty much Bitcoin Cash then, right? Bitcoin Cash was going to be a temporary name, and the only reason that it
Correct.
stuck was because it didn't become de facto proof of work or
Well,
de facto Bitcoin, right?
This is the same thing that happened with the Bitcoin Cash Bitcoin SV split. Like you can go back and see that it was literally the same narrative going on, where they were like SV was just the implementation of Bitcoin Cash. It wasn't the name of the chain. It was, and even when they first split, it was like Bitcoin Cash ABC, Bitcoin Cash SV, and they were like, no, we're not Bitcoin SV, we're Bitcoin Cash, and we're going to have the most hash rate. It's going to be a vote by CPU, and we're going to take the ticker, and we're going to be Bitcoin Cash.
Mm-hmm.
And so you could say that it was a maybe the first proto hash war was the split. And if you wanted to, I guess you could say that Bitcoin Cash lost that. But then you're in like the same situation that you're in with any, you go to like religious splits and you're like, when the Eastern Orthodox Church split from the Catholic Church, like, well, the Eastern Orthodox Church is still around and going strong, Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox.
Yeah, but if you ask Luke Dash Jr., they're going to hell.
This is the thing. And if you ask someone in their church, Luke Dash Jr. is going to hell.
Well, so no, probably not. Like,
yeah,
I think that's really specific. I think a lot of Christians are a little bit lenient, but
oh, dude, no way, man. If you want to go back to the 1950s and 1950s in the South, and you ask the Baptist, they say, them papists, that's the devil's work. They're definitely going to hell. Like that was the whole thing with that. They thought Kennedy couldn't get elected because he was Roman Catholic. Remember that was a thing.
True. I remember hearing stories before my time about that.
Sit. Well, yeah, you're down in Atlanta, right?
Yeah.
So there you go. That was the home farmer. Of that. Yeah, there you go.
Maybe this is an East Coast thing, but like
Peter, you're in New York, right?
Yeah, I've grown up in the New York area too. So like in my neck of the woods, like it is more Catholic than anything else, but like it just people are Christian. Like people have like, it's a more blasé idea of like you're Protestant, you're Lutheran, you're this, you're like who cares? Like we're all Christian. We all have a Christmas tree.
And that's how it is in New Hampshire when it comes to crypto, right? So you go in the people who are actually spending it, and like you go to Portsmouth and you walk down the street where you can actually like go have a beer, go, like 20 different places, or you go to like Liberty Markets, or you go to PorkFest. It's really just like, what do you take? Well, what do you got? It's always that. It's like, oh, do you take Dash? Of course. Do you take Litecoin? Sure, I'll take it. Do you take Bitcoin Cash? Yes. Do you take BTC? Sure. Will you take Smartcoin? Absolutely. I could take like 20 different, and they don't care. They don't. It's not important.
You can very easily not make this religious and have the benefits of like everything. I think a lot of people fail to see that, and I think going back to what I was saying earlier, when you sell literally all your forks, you're incentivized to act that way.
Dude, I totally agree. I accept. I mean, my book, my coding class, my newsletter, I accept like a dozen different cryptocurrencies. I would never, if somebody was like, "Oh, will you take BTC?" I would never tell them no, ever. Like that would be the dumbest thing. That if you're trying to give me money, I'm going to take it. Now, on the other hand, I have definitely considered with my vodka, just like being like, okay, the price will always be 1 BCH. No matter what, no matter how it goes, price per bottle will be 1 BCH. And
wait, can I ask how much is a normal price of fancy vodka price target? You have to see BCH can be pegged to your vodka. So you can create the peg right now.
Let me tell you the reason why. I'll send you over the link. But the reason why is
I'm opening it up for everybody right now.
The distiller of my vodka recently died. And so when I was out at Anarcho Vegas last month, I actually went and met with his wife, who's now running the distillery. And so we made the decision that we will never make any more bottles now.
Oh,
So it is now scarce. It is now officially limited in supply, that the bottles that exist, there will never be any more.
so it's a collector's edition.
Now it's a collector's
But
edition.
you're gonna make other ones after this.
No, I think I'm done with the vodka business.
Really?
It was awesome. Yeah, it was absolutely awesome. But it was awesome because I was working with this distiller in Vegas, and he's what made it awesome. And now that he passed away, like super unexpectedly, I don't know if I could go and do it.
I don't know if you're looking at the live stream. I know you can't see what I'm looking at. But...
I can see the reflection in the back.
See, that's why the whiteboard's there.
Yeah, exactly.
No, but that's cool. All right,
so there might be the first thing to be there might be your unit of account, right? Maybe I'm going to be the guy.
All right, so all right, so we talked about Bcash, Bitcoin Cash, and we talked about the origin of Cash, and thank you so much, Ryan, for filling me in on that that link, that article. So let's now switch over to Core. Before, all right, so before Bitcoin Core was always core developers, and I think really the meme that was started with Gavin Andresen, and maybe it was before that. I don't know. Maybe it was during Satoshi's days that Bitcoin Core was called Bitcoin Core. But to me, Bitcoin Core was always for sure the people that actually have committed code to the code base of Bitcoin, and it was a group of people. I feel like, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like Bitcoin Core now means not only that, but also means BTC, which it was never meant to be like, hey, this is Bitcoin Core's coin. Like Core is the coup of people, with Blockstream and chain code and all these people, and that's Core and that's their coin. When did that narrative happen? And was it the Bitcoin Cash people that gave BTC that narrative? And was it because it was Bitcoin Cash, like with a extra word, and now Bitcoin needs an extra word? Is that really, like, I don't know, maybe y'all can talk about that?
Bitcoin Core, Bitcoin was not always called Bitcoin Core. Like yesterday I found an old hard drive of mine from like 2012, and I pulled it up and I was like, oh shit, here's a copy of the Bitcoin software, and it's like 0.6.3 from like August of 2012, and so I guess that version was released in June of 2012, and it's just, you read the README and it's just called Bitcoin. So it went Bitcoin, then it was called Bitcoin QT, and then they named it Bitcoin Core, but it's still, the program is still called Bitcoin D.
So I guess like Bitcoin Core was self-described, like
yes,
but it was self-described for the code base too, then I suppose.
Yes, it's specifically for the code base, right? So I
always thought
think
Bitcoin Core was a group of people too. So maybe it was always
the core.
I think there's a theme of a core as well. That's important.
Well, they would say the core devs, right?
Core
so when
devs,
they were talking,
you're right.
Yeah,
right,
when they were talking about the people, so what they were saying was Bitcoin cores, the people who are actually committing.
No, you're right.
So
it was always core devs. I don't think Bitcoin
core devs.
Yeah.
So, but they were described because Bitcoin is called Bitcoin Core. Like if you go and you look at the README, like the implementation is called Bitcoin Core, but the reason why they called it that was because other implementations came up. So you had Bitcoin Unlimited, you had Bitcoin Knots, which is Luke Dash Jr.'s, and even though you've got 98% of the nodes are running Bitcoin Core at this point, you still have some running some others. So they did it to disambiguate when it was there were no forks and it was just Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
But then people would say, when they were referring to decisions that were being made, they would say the core devs. So core devs became a thing, like that became like a power group. So you're describing the leadership, you'd say the core devs. And then I think with the fork, that's when people came to see the core devs as a power base, because it was like, who are these people who are not allowing these things to happen? Who are these people who are pushing for SegWit? All of that.
Yeah, I feel like I had a point to make, but I was just way off there. So let's just skip that.
Fair enough.
Let's see, what else did I write down? Would you say that? Actually, to go back to Bitcoin Core, would you say that a lot of people call BTC Bitcoin Core because Bitcoin Cash is playing at a disadvantage because it's called Bitcoin Cash?
I don't think that it's that. I think it's a means of disambiguation. So there are a lot of people that are in. Well, we just saw the history of Bitcoin Cash, so it's like I'll often talk about Bitcoin, and I'm talking like in general about the things that Bitcoin does. So like if I say something like Bitcoin has like as versus Ethereum, right? Bitcoin as versus Ethereum, Bitcoin has a transaction structure where there are multiple inputs and multiple outputs, whereas Ethereum has a balanced transaction structure. So in that case, I'm not specifically talking about Bitcoin Core. I'm not specifically talking about Bitcoin Cash. I'm just saying Bitcoin in general. If it's Bitcoin, it's got this. Or if I say Bitcoin has a 21 million supply cap, or if I'm talking about the reasons why Bitcoin is valuable.
I guess this really comes back down to definitions. Like for instance, like for someone like me, where there's only going to be one chain that's Bitcoin. I guess a lot of people, like especially maximalists, see it that way. So I would say, are you aware that maybe maximalists or someone like me might see this as maybe a slight?
Well, I think I think so much of anything that's coming out of Bitcoin Cash is a reaction to like just the vitriol and scandal and outright attempts to penalize.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's seen as a threat to like for instance, someone like me isn't threatened at all about something like that. Besides maybe my sanity of definitions, which isn't necessarily really important, uh, but for someone like a maximalist that's sold all their Bitcoin Cash, all their SV, like they're super gun ho on protecting Bitcoin. I think they see that as like a super like pretty much as like as an attack. Would you agree or no? I'm curious.
I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you could say it is a similar attack to Bcash, but to a degree, it's not actually an insult. It's sort of it's a recognition of the fact that Bitcoin Core has like a huge like 90% plus distribution in terms of the nodes, and it also is in reference to the fact that many of the protocol developers on BTC work regarding to Bitcoin Core as like the other entity, the sub entity, and to the degree that we can go into conspiracy la la land. Many of them also have relationships with various companies that we've talked about. So the point here, I think, is that Bitcoin Core, in terms of the usage of it, is a neutral descriptor when talking about the fact that Bitcoin is an umbrella term, and we have Bitcoin Cash and we have Bitcoin Core, and it is, no one's really disputing the fact that like Bitcoin Core has a lot of control over Bitcoin, and we're just sort of making that easier. Mm-hmm. And I brought this point up is that like Bitcoin Cash is always aligned because it uses cash, and it's said to be, oh, you're deliberately confusing noobs and all this and all that.
Right.
Where, you get to a point, and maybe this is like just me because, I come from like, a feisty background. I'm coming out, okay, you want to start like punching that way. Okay, why don't we get into the fact that we talked about the definition of Bitcoin, and we talked about, again, what the vision of Satoshi was. And, we can use that in a derogatory way if we want. But find all of the quotes of Satoshi to kind of like prove this is like part of the founding stock of it, the ethos. And, now we're just totally gear shifted into it's a settlement layer. It's a settlement layer. This is what it is. Like Lightning is where payments happen. Like, don't think about it. Like if you're going to go that route and like noobs are coming to the table saying, I heard Bitcoin was like money, it's currency. And then you have to go.
No, you're talking about 2016 Bitcoin.
What's that?
Well, no, look, so I do want to comment on this because I think it's actually a very interesting thing that you're bringing up here, and I think that it has to do with narrative control, and I think that it's not even things that people are doing. It's not even something that people are doing consciously, but it basically the line basically goes like this: the desire for maximalists is what we're looking for here is disambiguation, right? So it's like, how do we tell these two chains apart? And what a maximalist says is, okay, call our chain Bitcoin and you call your chain Bitcoin Cash. I think on its face, I think most people wouldn't have a problem actually doing that with disambiguation on its face. But when you add to that, okay, call my chain Bitcoin, you call yours Bitcoin Cash, but I won't call yours Bitcoin Cash. I will call yours by another name, Bcash. Oh, and by the way, yours is not Bitcoin at all. It's just a shit coin. It's an altcoin. So now, shitcoiner, call mine Bitcoin and yours Bitcoin Cash, or otherwise that's an attack against me, shitcoiner. And that's where we're at.
And to be honest, it's to some extent it's true, because as soon as you start saying, okay, there's two types of Bitcoins and it's inclusive, well then the meme of, maximalism kind of dies off, right? So uh, the Bitcoin calling, and then going one step further, calling Bitcoin Core takes that to another step where it's like, okay, now it's normal that there's, you're slowly introducing this idea that yes, there's multiple Bitcoins and maybe BTC is not the best Bitcoin, and that's really how, in my opinion, if BCH was to take over, it would be doing stuff like this. So I mean,
Well, of
that
course
is
it is. I mean,
definitely,
it's all
but
meme.
what
Yeah.
I'm trying to say is maximalists see that, people like me see that, you should see that, and you should see that it's a slippery slope. If Bitcoin Cash is going to take over, it's going to do all these things, and maximalists are going to defend their territory, right? So
Yeah.
I don't think it's weird, or I don't really think it's a double standard. It's, all is fair in war, right? Or love in war.
Exactly.
So I
Well,
think
it
makes
is a
sense
war.
that anything that's one step in the direction of maybe replacing Bitcoin is attack on the people who want to keep the original Bitcoin. So
So, Mike, can you go to? I sent you a tweet of Amari Sachet's. It's the one I sent at 8:09.
let me
You just-
log into another browser so it doesn't pick up on the live feed. Hold on.
I think you keyed in on the right thing, and that is that this is a war, and it's been a war since before the fork happened.
More.
And it is a meme war, and so that's what is happening, and it's people trying to take control of narrative, and it's just what happens in war, and we're seeing a new form of warfare that's like so far a non-violent form of mimetic warfare. But what I will say is that is, in reading this Christianity, the first 3,000 years, that's exactly how Christianity started out. There were a lot of schisms and a lot of non-violent mimetic wars. And eventually those turned into very, very violent wars when Christians had control of the state. So I said this when DeRose and Krawitz and I had a thing in Portsmouth during Bruce Fenton's conference called Bitcoin Heretics. And toward the end of it, I said that we should fully expect that if you imagine if we right now had control of the state, that I think that there are maximalists who would go out and persecute and kill Bitcoin Cash people. I do think that there are people with their mind state as it is right now who would feel morally justified in doing that. As crazy as that sounds, I do actually believe that it's the case.
Well,
and I think that
what is the case exactly? You're saying that it will get more violent, like physical? What were you trying to get at?
If Bitcoiners had control of the state, so it's like, look, dude, Protestants and Catholics, when they get control of the state and they're in a place, Muslims and Christians, like, you name it, dude. Like, when you have these ideologies that don't make any sense, Hatfields and McCoys, whatever it is, when you have in-group, out-group, and then you have the ability to wage violence, the only reason why this has remained non-violent is because nobody has enough control over the coercive violence of the state to make it more than that. Seriously.
Yeah. Yep. Definitely see that. So do you have the tweet I mentioned?
Yeah, so I want to open it up for the live stream. This is from Devilnex. how Bitcoin Cash supporters see coin market cap. It's funny because it's true. So let's see. Bitcoin is called settlement layer. Ethereum is called our anti-censor friends. Bitcoin Cash is called Bitcoin. Ripple is called Mr. Market Cap Manipulator. Litecoin is called Segwit Testnet. NIM is kind of, an IOTA kind of shit. We'll skip those, I guess. Bitmain, ASIC Bros. To be honest, I'm not sure what Dash and Bitmain's relationship is there, but I'll go with it. Well, its features to BCC. I guess that's like blind carbon copy for Monero. First hard forker bros. Yeah. Okay, we'll just stop there. But
I think once you get past 5, it's like,
So I think I'm just highlighting that tweet was from Amari. It's dated at September 6, 2017. So pretty fresh off of the fork. And
I didn't know the context of it. Sorry. So September 6th.
Yeah,
okay.
So this is what I'm getting at, that I do think that when we say Bitcoin Core, it is used as a neutral descriptor for the sake of, efficient communication. It's not a derogatory term, but I think there is a tension that has always been there with Bitcoin Cash supporters and those that remain on BTC, is that like you guys changed it to a settlement layer. Like it's not payments. It's like not money. Like everybody that was like coming in was like trying to use this for goods and services.
Well, I think the narrative's definitely changed. I don't think there's any dispute about that.
What does that mean to you, though, Michael?
To me, that opens up a spot for Bitcoin Cash to have value.
But I mean, what does it mean to you? What does it mean to you that they're changing the narrative when the
So I actually want to get into this a little bit later, but to me, I'll just go into it right now. I don't know if this is too bright because this super reflective whiteboard. Who would have thought a whiteboard's reflective? But to me, I don't know if you can see this, the 21 million thing that I hold dear, and this has nothing to do with what we're talking about in terms of total coins on Twitter, being, different projects. But to me, this going back to the Peter Todd thing that you're talking about with the inflation, to me, this potentially, narrative is one thing, but this is also maybe subject to change later. I don't know. That's what it means to me.
Why is it so important to you, this particular number?
So it's not important besides the fact that it serves the definition.
Well, that's a little circular. I mean, how did it make it in? How did it make it into the definition in the first place?
I would say I bought into it as the definition. I don't know. It's a good question. I would just say that in my mind, I've said this helps make the definition, and if that's not true, then if that ever gets infringed on, then like I said, I'm gonna have to say it's not really Bitcoin in my opinion. In the back of my head, I'm gonna say it's Bitcoin with an asterisk.
I mean, it just seems like an interesting thing to that is your. It's just interesting to me that it's like, of all the things up there, it seems like that is your biggest deal breaker. But it also
that's
seems
the thing
like
I think is most threatened in terms of this list.
Well, but you had said that if there was if Peter Todd got his way and there was a fork that went to 21 million, you would be like, I'm on that fork. That's the real Bitcoin. I'm over there with 21 million. And to me, it seems interesting that on the one hand,
I don't think I said that. I said I probably wouldn't sell the fork.
Right.
I would maybe. So if they ever did anything to change the limit, the shitty part is it's going to have a really bad name. It's going to be called Bitcoin 21 million or some bullshit. It's not going to have a cool name. Or it's going to be called,
you, that would be Bitcoin.
To me, that would be the most purest version of Bitcoin, yes.
Okay, so it seems interesting to me, right? Never mind selling it.
But for instance, let's say the purest form of Bitcoin to me lost total hash rate. Well, then it would be I think the most pure one is the most SHA-256 work. So if we ever changed the proof of work, then it would
Okay, hold
You
on,
know,
hold
that
on.
also
So
gets in really weird
hold on,
territory.
hold on, hold on. So hold on, Peter. So what you're saying is, so this is different than what you said before. So I'm trying to understand.
Okay.
What you're saying is, if Peter Todd got his way and they increased and there was inflation, so it was more than 21 million, but that particular chain still had the most proof of work because people were like, who cares about this 21 million? He had really convinced everyone of that meme.
Yep.
Then you're saying you would abandon the 21 million as being a
hold on.
prerequisite. And
okay. I understand what you're saying.
you understand what I'm saying?
When you said
So
abandon, like I wouldn't say I would
as
abandon it, but
you would abandon that as as being part of the
I
definition.
think
So then if we
literally this
hit
is
you at
the
that
most.
time,
I think this is literally the most important metric. I think at that point
so
you
so
have
you
to
should
prioritize the
erase
metrics.
you should erase 21 million from your definition because it's not actually part of your definition then.
Well, you're bringing up a good point. Like if this is literally the most important thing,
Then that is your whole definition.
but if we're going to prioritize these, I would probably say number one is this is probably the most important. Keeping history of the UTXO and not disenfranchising old UTXO holders. I would say that's number
Which ones
one.
are mandatory? Without prioritizing, which ones are which one that if it went
these
away,
these two.
So which are what? Which are SHA-256 most work, and
Let me
Satoshi could spend his
explain.
UTXOs.
Number two is we're not going to steal money from people.
Right.
That's pretty much number two.
Right.
And number one
Satoshi could spend his UTXO. So most proof of work and Satoshi can spend his UTXOs.
Yeah.
That is your definition.
And then you see how there's an asterisk next to this 21 million?
Right. Yeah.
This one is like a really nice to have.
Right. But not
nice
mandatory.
Dude, for the definition, I would really have to think about that. I would have to really think about that. I would say at that point, there's a conflicting definition where if another chain has more SHA-256 work, right?
Yeah.
And it's above 21 million, then it's a conflicting.
So
obviously
here's
you'd be
why
filtering out the one that has more work. So I would say. Ask me when that happens. I might have an interesting answer at that time. So I really don't know.
Here's why I think it's not just like a trivial and academic question,
Mm-hmm.
because miners are going to, if we're talking about long term, miners would prefer to expend their hash power on a chain where they got more coins. So
more
it
value,
seems
more value. So for instance, if it's number of coins, it's the value too.
Sure, but like if there was an opportunity to fork away and be like, well, no, we're gonna keep the inflation, you might get a situation later on down the road when it's only like, what is it, 1.7 something Bitcoins per block, where somebody could really come along and change the whole thing up, and then it's not just an academic discussion, right?
Well, I think that's why Bitcoin Core is so big on fees. They want to establish that miner incentive, right?
Are they big on fees? I mean, they want to do Lightning. The fact that they want to do Lightning,
they want to So I would say the fee market, establishing a fee market is super important.
But if you're doing Lightning and all of the transactions are locked up and not moving, and they're all moving on Lightning, you're not getting any fees.
Yeah, but every single Lightning open and close is going to require an on-chain settlement or on-chain transaction. So if it's being used by the whole world, you'd still have ample fees. So if, for instance, let's say,
but that's not true, dude. But that's not true. Because if it's used by the whole world, the way that Lightning is already shaking out.
Let's say it's used by a couple 100 million people actively. We'll make it something realistic.
That's fine. That's fine. 100 million people actively. The way that Lightning is already showing that the topology has to work is hub and spoke. So you get these massive hubs. If you look at the topology of the network right now, you see these massive hubs that then people connect to. And then because they're connected to these massive hubs, they have very few jumps. So the question is,
back to what you're saying earlier about we could have everything be done with one miner. It's just the fact that it's decentralized enough to where if we wanted to do it ourselves and we wanted to run a node just between my company and your company, and let's say I know we're going to be business partners for a couple of years, so I'm going to spend $1,000 or whatever equivalent in Bitcoin to open up a channel just with us because I know this is going to be a business deal. Then I think It's just the fact that, yeah, it might be cheaper to use existing rails that are using channels,
Yes.
but I think just the idea that we could do it if we wanted to is the idea there. So I don't. Anyway.
So the thing with fees is, though, if you had Wells Fargo on one side and Bank of America on the other, let's say that they bought into it, right? If they bought into it, they're going to open a channel for billions of dollars and they're never going to close it because they settle between each other back and forth constantly. So it's like you would have billions of dollars of activity. You'd have potentially millions of people connected to nodes on this thing with their own, right? But they wouldn't have to open a channel because they're going to use a custodial wallet just like is existing right now. So what you wind up with is no fees because nothing moves because it's all on Lightning, and that's the vision of Lightning. So it's like you can't have it both ways. You can't
I think
we're really
well
go ahead.
the way I'm having it both ways is because I think there will be ample demand for to use on chain. I think there will be like those blocks aren't just going to be empty. People will, if it's free, people will spam it. If it costs a little bit, then they'll find use case. You know, the more it costs to use on chain, the higher value the use case. So
Yeah.
if it becomes, there will be some happy medium where it's like, well, it's just more expensive to not be used for blogs, but it's just high enough to where we can take this, do some kind of transaction on it. You know, it's going to be something like that.
Sure. So, but to comment on that, and I think there's sort of like a transition that will occur of like terms of the adoption and the base chain and Lightning and how that will all play out. But assuming that the base chain is still valued and it currently has like a 400 or so thousand transaction capacity ceiling, we're going to be in a world where those
per
fees.
year?
What's that?
400K per what time frame?
Per day.
Per day. Okay.
Yeah. So what, just do the math on the data. And it's not exactly that, but simple math. But the point is, once it hits that ceiling, it's going to need fee markets even more so, and thus the fees need to increase to determine who gets in. And so when we start to get back to $5 fees, $10, and then now we're hitting $50 again, like the all-time high.
Yep.
The only way that Bitcoin goes forward without block increases is that the fees keep increasing, and that the people that actually operate on the base chain are basically institutional, some sort of quasi bank. And like, I don't say this as like as a conspiracy tard Bcasher. I say this as someone that has read Saifedean Ammous and who says this like explicitly, that the way Bitcoin settlement layer runs the course in the logical conclusion of all this is that there'll be about 850 central bank-like entities that will operate on the base chain that can afford the high value transactions. And what will happen is they'll be in charge of basically interacting with customers, batching the transactions, and then settling between them, and then using other third-party services and Lightning in particular as sort of the way they interact with consumers and the way consumers interact with one another. So the way that the Bitcoin base chain plays out is that like we get to a scenario of like a fee for one transaction is somewhere around like $50,000, and a bank is doing that. Like some sort of like cartel of 800 institutions are using that as a settlement layer to maybe do that like every week.
Like what we have right now.
Exactly.
Exactly what we have now.
And then how that exactly,
how much?
There's the economic arguments of like how this all plays out. There's the technical arguments that like people talk about. Is this even feasible? Like, does Lightning even work? And you can play that all out. But like just for this example, like we know Bitcoin will get to the point where like you'll have this cartel of institutions because if you don't raise Q on the blocks in terms of like miners need revenue is price times quantity. And if you don't raise Q, the number of transactions you can fit in a block, you must raise price and thus to increase revenue. So that's what's going to keep jacked up. Now you go to Bitcoin Cash, there's not like we don't care about the fee market. We're saying you raise Q. In balance of supply and demand, you keep raising the block size to accommodate the increased level of demand.
Sure.
What will happen is, and I forecasted this out a bit, so let's say when the halving occurs, DCH to maintain the current level of miner revenue under the same, price level, keeping that constant, it's going to need 36 million transactions to occur on chain. So like that's nuts. But the point being here is that the way Bitcoin Cash is seeking to actually move forward is to increase the number of transactions. And I think whether they get like how this all balances out, because whether the price increases first or how exactly the miners are affected by not having as much revenue and how they think about that, because miners didn't get that much revenue in the early days to begin with. So I don't really buy into this, like it has to be profitable, like day one argument.
Why was Hal Finney mining?
Yeah, exactly. I think I think not enough people respect like how venture capitalists think about the world. So the point here is that like Bitcoin Cash is striving to like maintain security through the miner revenue by not like jacking up fees, because that centralizes the base chain to a cartel that is explicitly stated by the main proponents of BTC. In the future, they want to say there is equal opportunity for everyone to use the base chain because the fees are so low. And we will increase the number of transactions because maybe we can't get there alone on just the pure monetary and cash. But once we enter the world of SLP tokens, and now we're sort of getting back into things people have been talking about and almost why Ethereum was created. Now that we have SLP tokens that are
that stand for? What's that?
Simple ledger protocol.
Oh, okay.
ERC20s on Bitcoin Cash. So now that we have that, and now Bitcoin Cash just suddenly opened the door to not just like the market for money, but the market for every value transfer. So think about every transaction in the world, not just like a cash transaction, not just like you paid your friend Venmo. Think about every stock, every bond, every Amazon gift card point, every World of Warcraft goal, everything out there that is a value transfer. Suddenly that market is open to Bitcoin Cash because of SLP tokens, and suddenly increasing the transaction count to like millions and millions doesn't seem that implausible. So that is how Bitcoin Cash solves the fee market.
So I understand what you're saying. I'm curious. Do you see a future or a world where something like Schnorr signatures will happen? Something where optimizations and they'll squeak out as much efficiency as possible with Bitcoin, and maybe even 2-3x the capacity what's currently at.
Bitcoin Cash has had Schnorr signatures since May, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I know they're doing some with Schnorr signatures, but I don't know what the efficiency of it has been.
They're fully enabled. Most of the wallets, that's the default. They sign with Schnorr signatures, and it's going to be multi-sig coming out in this next hard fork, multi-sig with Schnorr signatures.
I'm not sure on what the efficiency is. What have you seen in terms of like how it's reduced transaction sizes and batching and stuff?
I think I want to say it's the number that's sticking out to me is something like, I think it's something like 15%.
Okay.
In a reduction,
not
but
like
it may be more than that,
like 50% or something. But it is.
It couldn't be 50%. It could. I mean, just because the script sig doesn't take up that much space, so it couldn't actually be 50% to do it with Schnorr signatures. So it couldn't. There's just not that much space to reduce. So you get what I'm saying? That it's like even if you were to take the actual like entire script sig out, like it wouldn't reduce it by 50% or 60% or something like that. Like it's just the structure of the transaction is such that that wouldn't be the case.
So I don't, to be honest, I don't know enough about Schnorr signatures. I thought it was something where you could potentially combine. You would be able to assign inputs and have a lot less. You'd be able to do like essentially coin join with Schnorr signature to greatly reduce like the amount of input space into transactions, where you'd be able to like sign for like someone, they'd be able to sign, and then it's like you're processing this big transaction for like a lot of people, but it's still like secure and everything. But
you
like the
can,
input of the transactions like the majority of the transaction. So I was thinking maybe if you reduce the input from every single transaction that's on chain, then maybe it'd be like significantly smaller, but I could be wrong.
No. It absolutely does. Like that's what it does. But what I'm saying is that so the input has has more data than just the signature in it. So the signature portion, even if you were to reduce it to 0, like which is basically what SegWit does, like it takes the signature out, like that's segregated witness. That's what it's doing. It's taking the signature from out of the input.
You're
but
saying
like
that's
even if you take
not even 50% of the input?
No, well, it's not 50% of the transaction, right? So I don't think it's even. I'd have to go and look. It's a lot. It can be depending on the signature. It can be a lot of the input, but you have other things like in it itself. So it's like it doesn't affect the outputs as the first thing. So that doesn't affect those 32 bytes that you have per each one of those, right? So it doesn't affect all of the other things that have to be in there. So it's affecting a piece of the input. And I don't even think it's affecting 50% of the input.
I guess my my assumption of that and what I've seen with like Bitcoin transactions, it was a little bit like I was thinking the signature was like nearly most of the input, and the input being in totality, like if you have one input, two outputs, like a standard transaction, your input's still going to be like 2/3 of the transaction in total.
It is,
so then if
but
you
it's
have like
not
stuff like 2 inputs or 3 inputs, then it's going to be like 90% of the transaction.
I don't.
Because the output's
Probably
just
not.
going to be like
If you have two, if you
it's
have
just
a
going to be
ton
like
of
an output.
inputs,
It's going to be like
yeah. If you have
encumbrance.
if you have a ton of inputs and like one output, so like if you're like consolidating, then yeah, that may be the case. But if you have like one input and two outputs, removing the signature completely from a well, look, what's it going to be? It's going to be are we talking about a pay to public key hash? Like, are we talking about? It doesn't really matter if we're talking about SegWit because then you've removed it already anyway. So like you don't get any more savings with Schnorr signature and SegWit. But if it's like pay to public key hash, is it? I would have to go and look at the numbers, but if it's 1 to 2, I do not think that that's going to reduce it more than like maybe 20%. Maybe you'd get 20% by totally taking out the signature out of a pay to public key hash. Could be wrong. It could be a little bit more.
If you're interested, here's a link that we can look at later. If you
go
want to
ahead.
dive into it, I don't know if you want to dive into it or not, but I'll be honest, I'm not too terribly interested in getting the exact numbers. But I guess my point originally was if Bitcoin does all it can do for efficiency, so it tries to like you know use Schnorr signatures with multi-sig and do all these things, and maybe get a couple, maybe 100% more transactions pushed into this block size and all this, and then they do literally everything they can that they can think of with I don't know, some taproot stuff, and there's other things that I don't know, musigs, and maybe scriptless scripts, whatever. I don't know. At that point, would you think that they would not raise the block size even still if they found no more efficiencies to optimize on or whatever?
Well, the difficult part about this is that like the optimization you're talking about is optimization in the code of what you can actually do with your transaction. So we have some historical example of whether or not this is the right way to go, and that is SegWit. So we've had SegWit for 2 years, and I think if I have this right, SegWit is still only less than 50% of the transactions.
I think I saw a tweet
that people are doing.
I saw a tweet the other day where it hit like 60% on average.
Okay, 60%.
But even still, it's probably that pay to script, that pay to script hash, kind of fake SegWit thing that people are using.
Yeah, right.
The real SegWit stuff.
Right. So that is to say that like it's a two-pronged problem. Not only do you have to make everything optimized, but then you run into the problem of you now have to convince everybody to use the optimized version as opposed to using what they're using at the existing time, which means you're putting a financial burden onto all of the companies in your ecosystem to switch over. And
Exactly. I think that's actually kind of a cool, beautiful part of Bitcoin, though. I think there's like incentive to upgrade where versus most software solutions, there isn't really a clear incentive besides, maybe additional features and utility, but the incentive here is it'll actually cost less. So if fees
but
dramatically go up, you have like a real incentive to reduce space that you're
well,
using
is that an incentive? I mean, is that a carrot or a stick? That's the question. Like, are the developers?
I think that is the question, but I think just in general, it's kind of a beautiful idea that we can, like, if there is maybe, take Bitcoin out of the equation, incentivizing people to upgrade is kind of hard without, forcing them. And I think it's, to be honest, I think it's more of a carrot than a stick, but I think that's probably on a spectrum, to be honest. But I would say it's mainly carrot. That's my opinion on it.
But
I
can
mean,
I ask you, like, how much efficiency, like, even if we're just like, doing the equivalent of quantum physics on Bitcoin, like, how much efficiency are you going to get by like doing SegWits and all these other types of upgrades where you're trying to fit more in a given block, opposed to like, dude, just like upgrade the size, because that's what
Yeah.
you're effectively doing here.
I get you. Upgrading the size would be a faster solution to scale more users immediately. I
Yeah,
think
like
that's pretty clear.
talking about, like, effectively their block size increases. Like SegWit is a block size increase to 2 megabytes. So
Not really. I hate when like
effectively, Jimmy Song, like,
well, hold on.
writes
You know what that block would have to look like? That block, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that block would have to be like huge aggregated transactions where it's like many,
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
inputs, and it would just be like a really bizarre block where it's like
Yes.
just like maximum size transactions that are just all pay to script or all SegWit input kind of like transactions where you wouldn't be like one input, two outputs, one input, two outputs. You wouldn't have like a
Right.
block that looks like that. It'd just be like mainly inputs, like
That's right.
consolidation.
I
And then
mean,
you would get
That's
like
right.
you get like
to the
2
here, but
megabytes. You get a 2 mega, but hold on, you get a 2 megabyte block, but the transactions per second equivalent would be like way low. It would be like
Yes.
you'd
right.
only get like
That's right.
10 transactions a block.
okay, but like, are there more transactions that can occur per day with SegWit than without SegWit?
Yeah, because people on average do aggregation transactions, which takes up a large part of blocks. So you're
Okay.
essentially making those take up. You're essentially making them less burdensome. But to get to that 2 megabyte block, I think you need like the majority of all those transactions to be like aggregation transactions, which means less transactions per block.
Okay, well,
It's kind of weird,
I
right?
think we're getting into the weeds here. What I'm saying is that, like, the point of these upgrades is that you're trying to accomplish the same goal, which is more transactions per day
Yes.
at a reasonable fee level.
Yeah.
By, fitting more into a given constant block size. But the point is, like effectively, like, how much are you going to get to? Like, you're going to get to maybe equivalent like 4 megabyte blocks,
See,
8 megabytes.
that I don't know. I see, like, until Vin over here sabotaged my thinking. I was so, on the BTC bandwagon until Vin was a dick. But I mean, so I don't know. I would have to do more. I would have to do more research into Schnorr aggregation, because I was thinking that Schnorr with built-in multi-sig kind of ecosystem would potentially be able to reduce or significantly increase throughput. And then from what Vin's saying, I'm really not sure. I need to look more into it. So I would say previous
Well,
to this conversation,
I think that it goes like it is able to do it in a scenario like what you just described with SegWit, right? It's able to do it if you have a scenario where your transactions are almost exclusively inputs, like where if you have way more inputs, then anything that you do with the signatures, whether that's SegWit, whether that's Schnorr, it has the effect of that increases when the percentage. Obvious, I mean, it just makes sense, right? Like, if the percentage of the block size that's taken up by inputs increases, or it's more, then whatever you do to reduce the signature size is going to have a greater effect. But if I just don't know that if you have like the 1 to 2 or 1 to 3 that it really makes that much of a difference.
So my answer to you, Peter, is I need to do more research. And to be honest, a good person that talks about something really specific like this would be probably another Peter Waller. I think that there's not actually too many people. So the longer I'm in the Bitcoin space, the longer I find out no one really knows what they're talking about except for like 4 people. And really, if you want to know something specific about a certain project, there's like you have to know like the 3 or 4 guys for that project to get like the 100% right answer. Otherwise, you might be getting the right answer. Does that make sense? So
well, you realize like and this is the reason why I said we have Schnorr signatures in BCH. That meant that like dozens of developers already have worked on this problem in Bitcoin, like as it's going to be done on BTC, because they were basically using the proposals for BTC and they just basically implemented them beforehand in the same way that Litecoin implemented SegWit beforehand, right? Because it's much easier to get it was much easier to get it done. And BCH has a hard fork policy that every 6 months we're going to hard fork. And so changes can go in every 6 months. So it's like, this is already like, it's already there. They already know what the reduction is.
Yeah, but they're not maybe using it to its maximum potential. And I would say to your point, Ben, it might be worthwhile me actually reaching out to a Bitcoin Cash developer to get those answers.
Well, I've got it's Mark Lundeberg. I'm going to be with all these guys in I think Mark Lundeberg's the one who put it in mainly, but I'm going to be with them all in Australia next week.
This is the question I would like you to ask them and get like the most detailed answer.
I will.
Like, what is the maximum potential of Schnorr signatures with aggregation and multisig and yada yada yada? And I would be very interested to get that answer, because that really, answers Peter's question. And I don't know how to answer it, to be honest.
I will ask Amory. I'll ask him after this or Mark. Cool. If while we're talking, I can just ask right now. I'll just ask on Telegram right now. Well, I think that one thing that is always left out of this, and it's something that I talk about a little bit, but I don't think anybody really gets it. The one thing that everybody has assumed that I think is weird is that we are all assuming that the people who are interested in mining are all going to be doing it in the future for block rewards or for fees that are coming out of the miner fees. But what we don't think about is that there might be new business models whereby somebody is making billions of dollars by, let's say, something on SLP tokens or whatever it is. This company is making billions of dollars, or these companies are making billions of dollars. They see that, oh, wow, these miners are going away. Well, it's worth it for us to start mining and start securing this chain, because we have a business model where, let's say, we're taking fees in an extra output, for instance. So let's say it's a video game company and they've decided that they're going to use Bitcoin Cash as their in-game currency. And it's like World of Warcraft, right? And every single time there's a transaction, they take a little fee out of that in an extra output. And they're making billions of dollars. They're making way more money off every block than the miners are making. Then why wouldn't they be the ones who are now securing the chain? We're just assuming that can't happen, but if we're going to have hyper Bitcoinization, that is going to happen.
That's a good point. Do you know who Stephen Pear is?
I don't know.
So he's the CEO of BitPay.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
He in 2013 he also was very big on that idea, like really really big on that idea. So
I mean, it makes sense.
I think that's definitely an interesting aspect. Hey, Peter, I kind of cut you off a little bit on the technicals of I don't know how much efficiency. Where were you going before?
Well, I just want to say, I think what might get lost here is it's not like I'm saying like those aren't novel ideas and those aren't like mitigants and solutions. I'm saying that, like, if we play the logical conclusions out, it's like you have to increase the block size at some point. So we need to like face that. And it seems if we're measuring all the risk and reward appropriately of what these solutions will do versus a block size increase. I mean, it just seems awfully weird that there's all this superstition around raising the block size. Like, I just don't understand why that is so anathema.
So
When
I can tell you from my point of view, or what I think the argument is. So I think this goes back to decentralization. So for instance,
Yep.
do you let me ask, do you run a Bitcoin Cash node or a Bitcoin node or anything?
No.
Then do you?
Absolutely,
So
because
you run one for your
my
business?
business
So
my business Cointext.
which
Yeah,
nodes
absolutely.
do you actually run? Because it sounds like you accept multiple coins.
I run an ABC node. I run the only one that I don't run. So we have a Litecoin node, a Core node, an ABC node. The only one that I don't run that we go off of an Explorer is Decred, but it's not even really public. It's kind of just like a fun thing that we did on the side.
Okay. So I would say if Bitcoin, let's say the cost of running a node was 10x what it is now, would that would still be reasonable to run a node, would you say, or no? Like
I would say
if your infrastructure cost went up 10x.
I would go with the paradigm that someone observing the node is not in and of itself what makes Bitcoin interesting. The people that are sort of nodes in sort of the white paper sense are really the miners, and then sort of the observer class, it's really anyone that has sufficient capital to run the node themselves, and like Vin was remarking about, create a new business model off of running that node. So like data auditing services, that is a business model that no one's considering. And like, so you can have your miners, but then you can have this third type, which are all these
Like
auditors.
are you talking about like chain analysis kind of
Yeah,
use case?
exactly. So like think about them, and it's like there's going to be these people that pop up and like run that and like make successful businesses out of doing it. And the question comes in, is it really like the dude that's like living in his bunker in the woods, is him being able to run a full node to like, have his vote count in the validating of the Bitcoin blockchain? Is that what makes it interesting? And is that what keeps it secure? I don't think that is as important. And I think that is sort of like a non meritocracy to sort of make Bitcoin about that. I think Bitcoin is a meritocracy in that the people with the capital and the people that are entrepreneurs come to the table to basically compete as miners, as well as these other, third-party businesses to basically secure the blockchain.
Sure. So I don't think either of us disagree. I mean, I think that makes sense, but I would like to at least address like your question, which was why why keep, I think you're asking like why keep the block small, why keep it like that. I think this goes back to decentralization, people being able to run their own node, and whether or not that's important, I think is a whole other conversation that you're kind of exploring just now. So I think like at least the argument pretty well.
I totally know
it's
the Iron Man opposed to straw man of what you're saying there, the BTC argument. So I get there's the issue of because that will happen, there'll be sort of a hierarchy. There will be some sort of acentralization there. But I think the point is it is mitigated by the incentive design of Bitcoin, whereas not increasing the block size creates this perverse high fee environment, which, as Saifedean Ammous, again, I'm not like making stuff up, I'm quoting the advocates, I'm going straight to their text. He is talking about a future where there will be like 800 institutions and they will control the base chain. I think that is like way more risky and corruptive centralization that anything that a block size increase can do. And no one's actually bought in totally on the idea that the cost of running a full node compared to bandwidth and hardware and everything else will actually be so cumbersome to a hobbyist. Like that's not even settled. Like when you look at the depreciation cost of how you can get bandwidth in and get it out and get the hardware. It's not like crazy as everyone's making it out to be.
Well, it's on a spectrum, because if it's gonna eliminate some hobbyists and not others, right? It's gonna eliminate some people with more disposable, less disposable income, and if you make it where it's nearly free, then people can, everyone can run it. If you make it where it costs anything, then you automatically eliminate some people. If I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? So I think the route Bitcoin Cash is taking is, look, not everyone obviously needs to run a node, and matter of fact, it's really the miners and service providers that need to run nodes, more or less.
Do you know it's cheaper to run a Bitcoin Cash node right now than it is to run a BTC node?
Sure. I mean, the blockchain's smaller.
So what we have right now is like, that's not an issue. But I first off, I don't think that's actually been, I don't think that's been said by Bitcoin Cash. I think that more what is being said by people in Bitcoin Cash, which is me as well, is that, and I'll ask you this question. You brought up the scenario of like 100 million people using Lightning. If 100 million people were using Lightning on a daily basis, so that scaling had actually worked, let's say everything works, what percentage of that 100 million people do you believe will be running a Bitcoin node or even a Lightning node?
I don't know. I mean,
I guess. What would you say?
I don't know. Maybe like 10, 20,000. I don't know.
10,
maybe
20,
at least 20,
so
20K.
So 20 out of 1,000, so 2%.
Yeah, maybe
so
like 2%. Maybe like less than 5%. Somewhere between somewhere between 1% and 5%, I think, is pretty realistic. I don't know.
So I think then what we're talking about is like, okay,
this is what it's easy to run. That's the caveat to that. It has to be easy enough to run. Yeah.
So even if it's harder,
we're saying if it's super.
So now we're saying if it's super easy to run, it'll be less than 5%, right?
Let's call it 5%.
Okay, so we're saying that it's 5%.
I mean, that's just me guessing.
I think that's a fair and reasonable guess. I think that anybody who's really thinking about it is like, well, if it gets mass adoption, probably most people are not going to be bothered to run it. Like, if pretty much like it's gonna be people who are really dedicated to it. It's, you know what I mean? I think that's reasonable. So the question is this: what do you give up for that 5%? Like, what is that 5% worth?
Okay, so
that's the question.
Is the question. No, that literally is the question. And,
yes, it is.
And you really narrowed down on it with that. So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe you can shed some light. What would you lose? I'm not sure. You tell me.
See, I don't think that if 90 difference in centralization. I think that the difference between 95% and the difference between 99% is not, in anything in this life, is not a particularly big difference. I think that if what we were saying was that having these bigger blocks would change that number from something like 85, like 10% were not run, or let's say 90% were running it to 90% weren't running it, then I would say, okay, we've got an issue here. But if you're like, really what this is it's the difference between 95% of people not running a node and 99% of people not running a node. So, I'm like, I don't care about that.
Yeah, but I think, all right, so I think the valid argument against this would be, once you go too big, it's harder to go back. But if you work your way, it's pretty much like if you make Bitcoin a runaway, scale issue where it's like, there's obviously some kind of problem where it's going to be very, centralized on who can run a node, then maybe that's a problem. And now if it is a problem, you can't, it's not necessarily easy to fix potentially.
So why are the blocks on Bitcoin Cash not full? So where is this spam that was supposed to happen? Like, BSV went away. They have to create their own spam. Like, they can't even get somebody to spam them for them to have big blocks. They have to the miners have to literally create their own spam and add it into their own blocks in order for them to test big blocks on the mainnet, because they can't get anybody to spam them.
All right. So why don't you tell me how come no one's spamming the BCH chain if it's so cheap?
because there's no reason, there's no economic reason to spam the BCH chain, just like there was no spam happening. There's never been any spam. There's never been any spam. What there's been is there have been businesses that have been trying various different business models that might throw little transactions at the chain, but those eventually go away because it's like there's no reason to just spam it.
So for
This
me,
fear of
there's too
spam
many.
is not.
There's too many moving parts for me to give you a good answer on this. Like the moving parts would be like, it's a different chain. It's not as popular. It doesn't have maybe the same meme network effect. So it's maybe people don't know about it. Maybe people don't know
Well,
how
what
to
do you get
to
from
use it.
spamming BTC? Let's say BTC's fees were the same as BCH right now, right?
Yeah.
Let's say that they were. What
Mhm.
and with Bitcoin is known, BTC is known, it has most of the
Yep.
market cap. What is the benefit? So I know what the benefit of spamming somebody with email is, right? I could potentially sell a
Mhm.
product or it's telemarketing
So
calls, whatever. What
so
is
so
the
I could tell
advantage of
you
spamming the chain?
if the fees were really low on BCH, some of my transactions. So for instance, some of the services that use Bitcoin to like help merchants accept Bitcoin, they have like these timeout features where if they don't
Mhm.
receive the transaction with a certain amount of time, it really kind of sabotages everything. Someone needs to get refunded. Eventually, it clears, and the systems aren't aligned on what they should do with this money now, and that's really frustrating. So I'll tell you, it would solve. Like you're asking, what would happen if the fees were low? Well, it would solve those issues,
Well,
right?
no, I'm not
For
asking.
Bitcoin.
I'm not asking what would happen if the fees are low. I'm asking let's say I'm a spammer, right?
Hmm.
Why am I spamming? I'm taking time and energy regardless of how much I'm spending. Like, what benefit do I get when I spam the BTC network?
The BCC, which
No,
one?
BTC. With
BTC.
Bitcoin. Bitcoin. What advantage do I get? Let's say I can afford the fees. What advantage do I get by filling up a block with spurious spam transactions?
Yeah. So I don't want you to paint me in the corner of me agreeing that spam is possible on a chain that you have to pay for.
No, that's not even what I'm asking.
No, but
I'm
I
just
kind of disagree with the premise of there is no spam because you have to pay for your space.
right. Okay.
So
So
I don't want to defend that point too hard because I don't really
so
agree with it.
besides so besides financial besides financial transactions, why would someone pay for space? Let's not call it spam, right? Let's just say if I was sending transactions to mainnet,
If you
we could
want,
op return
let's
can
say
be
you want to
pruned.
piggyback, yeah, but I don't know who prunes off return.
I honestly don't
I
know
don't
if
know
anybody
either.
does.
I actually don't even know how you prune off return because if you want to go back and validate the transaction, it's like you need to validate it and then prune it. So you would
Yes, you have to prune it on the way in.
so
Yeah, that's correct.
all you're going to do is make it unqueryable, but it'll still be part of the blockchain because you need it to verify the TXID and everything. So,
Well, yeah, you'll have
uh,
the block header for sure.
yes.
Yeah.
So in order to verify that transaction and the hash of that transaction, you need every piece of that transaction. So
Yes,
someone's
correct.
going to have to hold that off return. Not everyone can prune it. Otherwise, the chain's invalid. So I
So
don't know that argument too well.
so
I've
the
heard DeRose say it actually, but I don't understand it.
so the concern is, so if I understand it, then the concern is that if the block size was increased and if fees were kept low to a much greater degree, that what will occur is that people will op return the shit out of your chain.
Or
But the
graffiti,
question, okay, but the question that I have is why?
graffiti
So
and the
I get
dress
the
name.
I get the op return like idea, right? I get the op
Mhm.
return concept and reason. Like there's plenty of op return that goes on BCH and on BSV. Like they did the weather.sv and all of that. They've got all that stupid
Yeah,
shit. But
and
my
I guess
question
what
is
we're
like, why is that not happening on BCH?
yeah, well,
Because
I because the fees, right? So it's making it where this is like on a spectrum, like where if you go free, you have the use cases expand, and if the fees go higher, then the use cases start to diminish. Where now it's better to use Bitcoin Cash for stuff like Spice, right?
but on Bitcoin Cash, it's the fees are 1 Satoshi per byte, and it's like under a cent. Why wouldn't you, if op return was a great thing to do, why wouldn't you just see it full up with op return and people making all of these applications with op return? Like, that was the reason to not increase the block size.
So I think that's a fair question, but I would also say there's some moving parts there. Like the network effect of Bitcoin Cash isn't as strong as BTC.
But with op return, that doesn't matter, right? Because all you're looking for with op return is that you're going to store some data. You're not storing anything special, and it doesn't matter that it's on BTC or BCH. You just need immutable data. So it doesn't matter if it's because your clientele are not seeing it. You're just like memo.cash or whatever. So what I'm wondering is, like, there was a fear that, in BTC, there was this fear that, like, if fees stay low, there's going to be all this op return action happening, call it spam or not. Then here comes this chain where the fees are low, and it's like, where's the op return action?
Yeah.
So I'm just saying it was an unfounded fear.
I think it's a fair question. I think that's a real fair question. The only thing I can think of, like in terms of any kind of counter argument, would be the reason why the blocks aren't being full if they aren't being full is because one person wouldn't have unlimited demand then essentially for op return. I think that's kind of like to your point though.
Yeah. I mean, I think that it was,
but
I guess basically,
if you add in like maybe a bunch more users, then obviously BCH blocks could be full with op return. Obviously, all you need is like 5 or 6 really like popular use cases where people are constantly pushing in op return transactions, and maybe what's the block size right now on BCH?
It's 32 megs.
Yeah. So how many users would you need making op return? I mean, you would need probably a lot.
Oh my god, dude, millions.
So you literally need you'd need like really like good games or use cases that are constantly writing op return or something.
Yes.
Like that's the only thing I can think of to I don't know.
But just maybe tie a bow on this. So let's just say like a spam attack happens. Like what you're saying occurs. Like there's just massive spam. Like at what point does that attack become a problem? Because if block size space is increasing, and you need a lot of transactions to like actually for where it is now to like make it happen. Like if block size is increasing and like thus the fees will adjust to more demand, like at what point are you saying that like, okay, well, the negative consequence is that you'll just get spammed and then there'll be so much demand that what will happen? Like, I don't exactly know where this...
Harder to run a node.
Okay, but again, like, it's going to be harder to run a node if we get organic demand too. And like, we want organic demand. Like,
harder to run a node for the 5% of people who would be running a node anyway. Like for the 95% of people, it doesn't even matter.
Like instead of like maybe let's say 5 plus like 5%, it would then be like 1% or something. I don't know.
Right. So we're talking about a difference in like 3%.
Yeah, but
I think that's probably a fair assessment without maybe doing a lot of thinking.
I think it's actually just going by human nature and the way that human beings are in financial services, or in anything. Like what percentage of people change their own oil in their car? You know what I mean? I think that's probably a good example right there.
Yeah, I think we've talked about well, the people won't get to run their own full node, and like maybe that's 5% of people, whatever, that otherwise would have. But like, don't you feel there's an equal, if not greater, loss in terms of people that will not be able to operate on the base chain because the fees are too high? Like we hit all-time high $50. So like that is around the corner. So like when one transaction is $50, like what does that mean that a hobbyist user is not able to transact like the way that it was supposed to be? And like how many of those people are then cut out? Like,
well, that affects the other 95. That affects 100% of the people.
Oh, exactly.
Right?
That's the greatest amount of harm that occurs, rather than like, because some like anon on Twitter, there's a cartoon character, like he can't run a node in between his like hot pocket breaks. Like I don't get like why he is like the ideal Bitcoiner we have to like rewrite everything for, whereas you're destroying the utility of like 100% and like tons of other people from being able to do like a base chain transaction. Like
because so that Luke Dash Jr. can run a node on his phone. That's really what it's all for.
This is the other thing. Like Luke Dash Jr. talks all the time too about the fact that like there's no way we can actually evaluate like node counts, reporting, non-reporting nodes, who is a node, like all this stuff is mysterious. So we're not actually in a place where we can say we know, a certain percentage of people are running a full node. He's just sort of going off the idea that, well, if you make costs low enough, then like we can have in our imagination, hopefully, people will run a full node themselves. And so like, and also like he's just doing a total quantifiable assumption there. That's like it's like what I see in economic academia all the time. People build models, they have assumptions, and then because they have a model, they can't break out of it. Like he's not even going with the qualitative issue of like Peter McCormick the other day. He comes in and says, I don't actually run a node. I don't know anything about this, even though I'm one of the biggest propaganda pieces, and I say that in a neutral sense, for BTC. Like that just proves the point that there's qualitative constraints to running a full node that are outside of cost.
So, all right, let's do the math. What is it, about $310 for Bitcoin Cash right now? What is it?
Yeah, go
somewhere in there. Call it 300. I think today was a bad day for
We'll call it
bad day for everybody.
We'll just call it 310 for ease of use. So would the proper math be, and this doesn't seem right, my math is probably way wrong. Is it only like $100 to pay all the fees for 32 megabytes with Bitcoin Cash right now?
It might be. That might be right.
So would I be able to fill an entire 32 megabyte block for less than like $100, pretty much?
You would have if you were not a miner creating your own transactions, you would have a very, very difficult time actually getting 32 megabytes worth of transactions onto the network. It's been tried. Satoshi shotgun. It's very hard to do. It's very hard for a single entity to do.
So for instance, if you just make like really small transactions, like 200 byte transactions.
Yeah.
And that's 32 megabytes, which is 32 million bytes, right? So it would be 32 million divided by 200. That'd be 160,000 Bitcoin Cash transactions in one block.
In 10 minutes. So you can break down what you need to do per second. It's really hard, dude.
Well, no, I'm just asking, like, so you do like 160. So it's really like, I guess I'm doing the math. It seems like it'd be about $100. I want someone to spot check me on that. That seems like way too low. But
no, I think you might be. I think you might be right there, dude. Okay, I think you might be right.
So has anyone? It seems like since the cost is so. I mean, did you just create your first Bitcoin Cash spammer? Like, am I going to take down Bitcoin Cash? Like, just spam? You can't, return. No,
dude. It's like, dude, the hash war. It was tried in the hash war. Like the BSV side actually like built a spamming weapon called Satoshi Shotgun to try to do this.
Are you serious?
And they spent months. Oh yeah, dude. They spent months trying to build this thing. It's actually really hard to do in a coordinated way. It's not a trivial problem.
So were they literally just like making op return or just spamming the chain, like with moving money back and forth?
Yep, they were just doing like the least that they could do, 546 Satoshis, like one input, one output, with the minimum miner fee that they could possibly. 546 Satoshis is the minimum output that you can have. 546 Satoshis. Not 546 Bitcoins, 546 Satoshis.
Is the minimum fee?
It's no. It's the dust limit of an output.
Oh,
you understand what?
Oh, yeah. Sorry, I thought. Okay, so
and then the fee on
outputs with that much.
Yes,
with that much
exactly.
Cash. Okay.
Yeah, and then and then the fee on it was whatever that would be, like 100 and a 1 and 1 is what? It's not. I think it's 190
like 120
something.
or 140.
120. There you go.
Yeah, whatever.
So it was that. It was those two things combined. So like they blew through, I think, like 17 grand during like a 24-hour, maybe it was more 48-hour period, trying to fill up these blocks.
They just stopped doing it.
Their machine kept breaking. I mean, you've got things that really prevent this sort of thing, like zero conf chain limits, like of only 25. You can only do 25 chain transactions in the mempool. Like all
This is good shit. This is like stuff that people don't talk about. I like it in terms of like I didn't even know about Satoshi shotgun stuff, so I like this.
Yeah, well, dude, it's all the action. Like I say, it's like these are the Protestants over here, so all the action and all the fighting is over on this side. You guys are guys are the Orthodox.
All right. So hold on, I have to fucking piss. So
go, dude.
But when I get back,
we've been at this for so long.
We've been at this Bitcoin SV now for a second, but
oh god,
I'll be right back.
Are you good, Peter? You good to stay? He's off. He took off. I don't blame him. I'm gonna have to go myself pretty soon.
Yeah, I'm running at the end of the time. I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm just.
Are you out of time? We can cut him off and not talk about Bitcoin SV.
Yeah, I think that's good.
I'm happy to not talk about SV at all. I'm really happy
don't
to
think
do
we
that.
need to really go. We can tie everything up and
let's tie it up.
We can baptize Mike here into the Bcash church.
Oh, I've got the answer from Mark Lundeberg.
Great.
Yep. He said, okay. All right. Let's see.
You know, as a side note with all of this,
yes.
You know, we squabble with these, you know, inside baseball.
We do, yes, yeah.
But like, I'm just thinking about like, okay, you have the Catholic Church, they argue with the Protestants, they argue with the Orthodox, and they're squabbling and they're having these, you know, very academic, historical things. Meanwhile, like just random evangelicals and Mormons from the United States are just like going out and playing missionary around the world in developing countries, and they're just like, yeah, we're Christians,
right?
And like no, like the normies of their world, like don't care.
All right, I'm back. Stop talking shit about me.
It's kind of like the way that Dash is. You know what I mean? Like here we are squabbling, and they're just out trying to evangelize. Okay, dude, I've got your answer here from Mark Lundeberg, who's the person who put Schnorr signatures.
Oh hell yeah!
Who was mainly responsible for putting Schnorr signatures into BCH. Okay,
all right, let's hear it.
So the question that I asked him was, what is the maximum input / transaction size reduction in percentage that Schnorr signatures can deliver? And he said, okay, it depends on what is done. For BCH, just introducing Schnorr signatures on a basic level only gives around a 4% size reduction on average. A more fancy feature, I think this is what you're talking about, would be to introduce signature aggregation at the consensus level, which means that a transaction can have one signature that stands in for many. From what I understand, this could deliver something like 15 to 20% size savings. And I asked him, is that in a transaction or in an input? And he said, that's in overall transaction size. Will depend on the transactions, of course, but let's say a typical transaction is 2 inputs and 2 outputs, then you get those kind of numbers. So we're talking 15 to 20%
oh my
size
God,
savings.
That's like not even close to what I was thinking. Piers,
it's
so
not.
to go to your point, I don't know of any magic bullet that's going to do like 100% efficiency increases.
No, there isn't, because there isn't one.
I mean, the funny part is we're fiddling with like we're squeaking out these bytes as efficient as possible, and I thought it could even get more, but I don't know.
No.
But so one thing that Jameson Lopp said at my conference. I say my conference. Shit, I'm really bad about that.
It is your conference.
Yeah, but
it is your conference.
But dude, a lot of people help. And dude, this
Fair
coming
enough.
next year, it's actually going to be a decentralized conference.
What does that mean?
So, have y'all ever been to DEF CON? You live in Vegas.
Yeah, at Vegas, of course I have. Yes.
So DEF CON has villages, right?
Yep.
I want to do a conference that has the spirit of DEF CON. Obviously, it's not going to be the same scale. It's going to be in Atlanta. It's going to be a lot smaller.
So like
but
a Bitcoin Burning Man.
kind of, but it's going to be more like if you run the village, you get to kind of pick what happens during the couple days that we have this conference in your
idea.
village. So
It's
if
cool.
you want to have a lightning village, if you want to have the spice village, if you want to have the art village, it's like, okay, you're going to own this village. You're going to figure out the speakers. And then if someone buys a ticket, they have access to everything.
Should do the Spice Village.
No, I need someone to run the Spice Village. So when we're about to book the venue for February, coming up really shortly, and then I want to start reaching out to people to be
awesome.
village leaders, and then
That's
essentially,
awesome.
but we're going to reserve the main stage off to the side. So there's going to be a grand ballroom, but then there's going to be a completely separate room that can hold about 600 people, and that's just going to be for like panels, topics about interesting stuff and stuff like
Sounds
that.
awesome, dude.
But then there's going to be like villages and like sponsors and other things off in the ballroom.
Share the sponsorship and ticket revenue to help pay for whatever they need to do.
That's unclear. So what
like signage.
Yeah, so I think every village is going to be in a unique situation. This is the first year I'm going to try it. So
will they make like an affiliate payment? Will they make an affiliate off the ticket sales or something?
So one thing that I was thinking about doing was if you're going to teach like a workshop and someone gives, let's say, $100 to get into the conference, right, which is really cheap, then every person who attends their workshop and then completes some goal, I'm like, dude, you're adding value to the conference. You're going to get some % of this ticket cost for every person who completes your workshop.
Oh, that's cool.
And that's kind of what I'm thinking. So if someone literally runs the gambit, then maybe they get like, I give 50% of the ticket back to the villages. But I've talked to a lot of people. So what we did earlier this year in February, every single dollar that we made, we actually spent towards the conference. So we spent about $10,000 on the after party. We literally spent everything back on ourselves. So I think it's going to be fun to do that again, but then maybe it's going to be helping the villages out or whatever, or making a more elaborate after party. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So I'm really excited for it.
Yeah.
I'm
gonna go.
I think we should probably
I think we've
up.
Yeah. I think that's a good idea. I'm about to go grab some food.
But you know what the funny thing is? I didn't actually talk about what I originally wanted to talk about, which was this 21 million thing that I wanted y'all to convince me on. And then the other thing was I really wanted to dig into the gold analogy that you're trying to do with this, where it's like, hey, like these gold atoms, and maybe if I don't know if y'all have any.
We'll
more
get
time.
around to it. No, I don't. We've been at this for so long.
Bitcoin is not gold. That's the short.
I was going to say, maybe we table those two topics for part 2 next month or something.
Would love to, dude. That would be great.
but now that we know each other, we can cut through the bullshit.
Absolutely.
Right.
Dude, thank you so much. Thank you so much for this. This was a great conversation, and nice to meet you. And you're a great dude, and you are an asset to your church, sir.
Hey, man, it's all about evangelizing, right?
That's right.
So another thing is I hope to see y'all maybe for TabConf in February if y'all
absolutely.
Are free, so,
Yes.
Okay.
Sounds like a plan.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you,
take
guys.
Yep.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks for your time.